I am seeing reports.
Let's make some lunch for adults.
I am seeing reports.
Everybody in the color queue.
Hello.
Hey ho 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 hey, ho ho. What's up?
How you guys doing?
We chilling. Dal's got some lady talking in the background. God.
Oh man.
Fuck.
But they all have Kevin Hart for
That's when Dal's like, pimping is easy.
Dal, what the hell, man? Who are you listening to? Sorry, I was a jackass there for a minute. Shit. We're just waiting for Kane and Perry will be joining us. A couple of my other friends I've invited to be speakers. Let me see if I got this other guy coming too here. I don't guess Zach is gonna be with us tonight. He's probably working. I guess I'll go ahead and invite the whole Pangburn hangout. Invite all. Go. Dal and Scott, you can do your video. I have no way to do my video, but go for it if you guys want to. Get them rolling.
I'm on my phone, so you'd just be looking directly at my nostrils. I don't think anybody wants to see that.
Sweet. Oh, here we got Kane. Invite him to speak. Kane. Hello, Kane. Have we got you? Are you here, brother?
Yeah, I think
You may
got
be
it.
on mute.
Yeah, hello.
Hey.
Sorry I'm a little late. I couldn't, I had some trouble signing up for the website.
There's no apologies at all. No apologies necessary. This is a very chill thing. This isn't like we're going to get on here and interrogate you. You know what I mean? Kane, it's really weird, man. Yeah, it's really weird, dude. I've been watching your videos for years, and I feel like I know you because I've heard your voice so much in videos, but I only realized it was you like a week ago that I was going to get to talk to. So I'm very excited, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the invite. I mean, I hope I can meet the expectations.
Oh no, I'm not. I won't hold you to any terrible standards. I have a lot of good speakers here, a lot of people who care about this subject matter and all this material, and I'm of course going to try to get all of them on video. Kane, if you want to press the video down there on yourself, you're more than welcome to. You don't have to. All up to you. I don't have a way to do mine right now. I will soon, but I don't have mine. Maybe somebody can join you too. We can get Scott when he gets home, or maybe Dal Sue. Dal, do you have camera capabilities? He's not listening.
It's saying I got to allow what is this? I've got to turn on camera permissions. Please allow camera permissions to turn on video. Oh damn! Like what?
It's totally okay if it doesn't work.
why won't it just turn on the camera?
Colin is still in beta, so
like what is that? Permissions? That's something on my end, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, shouldn't it be?
Yeah, I think if you just hit OK or something, it should go through.
Okay, so my camera is definitely working.
Yeah, we see you.
Something's happened.
Yes, we see you. Hello.
Cool.
Excellent. Scott will probably join you when he gets home, and I don't know if Dal, do you have the opportunity to do video?
Yeah, I need. And I'm trying to escape the giggles.
Oh, I see. I see. But no, I was just saying, Kane, your videos, man, have been really, really excellent for me. They've helped me a lot, and I've watched your entire logic series and your entire epistemology playlist, and I'm going into the other ones. I wish it had a way on your YouTube to where I could sort that I didn't have to like scroll all the way down to like 9 years ago to get to the very first one. You know what I mean? Like, it's so crazy.
Yeah, I do try to organize them into playlists, but I don't know. There's quite a lot of videos there now, and obviously different people are going to be interested in different things, so you just don't really know. I mean, just the way YouTube is, I suppose.
Yeah, you've done a good job with the playlist. I definitely enjoy it that way. So there are many other speakers here, and that's what we're going to do is just focus on our speakers right now. We'll take callers here in a little later, but I just watched. Well, I watched it I've watched it twice now. It's your logic is normative video, and I figured that was probably pretty freshly on your mind. Is that something that you're interested in talking about, or did you have some other ideas in mind?
I mean, I don't really mind. I guess I didn't have anything in particular in mind when you said to do this, so it's sort of up to you.
Yeah, I mean, we
guess
can
I
go
can-
wherever. This is not scripted or anything. We're just a chill hangout. This is I kind of like to think of my rooms as like a group study, you know? So,
Okay, cool.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see. Perry and me were watching that video earlier. Oh, we got Dalsu.
I've escaped.
You've escaped. Well, you've watched his videos too, Dal. What you got questions wise? What you got going on?
Oh man. Well, I first want to thank you for like a lot of my anti-realist positions. You convinced me of, like scientific anti-realism, especially, was the really big one. So I'd love if we talked about like what is scientific anti-realism versus realism. What are the arguments for realism, and why do you think they're wrong?
Sure. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah. So scientific. So the scientific anti-realism is like, as the name implies, it's sort of defined in opposition to realism, because I mean, really, there isn't like one thing. There isn't one scientific anti-realism. There's a whole bunch of different ways of being an anti-realist. And so scientific realism is the view that scientific theories, that we are justified in taking scientific theories to provide true descriptions of the world, basically. And I mean, not any scientific theory, obviously, but like our best scientific theories. So if you look at the theories that are accepted in the mature sciences, if you look at the accepted theories in physics, chemistry, biology, sciences like that, these theories provide approximately true descriptions of the world. Obviously, any realist is going to grant that we don't have the complete story. There's still a lot of things we don't know about the world. These theories are going to change somewhat, but they're approximately true, and the process of science is kind of building up more and more truth over time. It's building up more and more knowledge over time. So scientific realism is kind of optimistic about scientific knowledge, and it's optimistic about the ability of science to reveal the facts about the world. Now, scientific anti-realism is just going to be any view that denies this. The most popular, or at least the most influential, maybe it's not particularly popular, but it's certainly influential. The most influential kind of anti-realism in contemporary philosophy of science is probably constructive empiricism. So a constructive empiricist will say that the aim of science is to generate theories that are empirically adequate, where a theory is empirically adequate if it gives us true descriptions of the observable phenomena, where that
So
basically just means things that we perceive.
I was just going to jump in there real quick. I kind of fall into that a little bit, that constructivism. If somebody puts a gun to my head, correspondence, right? But but then I'm like, constructivism makes so much effing sense in the philosophy of science. I'm sorry to interrupt that flow. I wanted to agree there.
No, that's fine. I mean, there isn't. So actually, you say correspondence. I mean, a constructive empiricist could well be a sort of correspondence theorist. They could say, well, look, we get truth about the observable stuff. So I can see clouds and oceans and planets and all of that stuff. And yeah, science is going to give us true descriptions of that, and it's maybe true in a correspondence sense. So you might say that there's like an independent world out there, and that our theories, match that world. Our theories correspond to that world. But what the constructive empiricist will just say is, like, that's as far as it goes, and all of the content of theories beyond that is something that like we don't have to take it that there really are electrons, say, or black holes, or various other things, forces and fields and things like that. So the constructive empiricist is sort of limiting scientific knowledge to just the stuff that we can actually perceive with our senses. So anyway, that's like one kind of realism. One kind of anti-realism. There are other kinds of anti-realism, though. So another kind of anti-realism would be a sort of social constructivism, which says that that the fact, so that there isn't really an independent world. That like facts are products of social negotiation. So social constructivists tend to be, more extreme than constructive empiricists, because a social constructivist will deny that there are even independent facts about, oceans and planets and so on. Like everything is sort of up for grabs. Yeah. There's, as I say, a bunch of different types of anti-realism, but that's broadly the debate.
Yeah, it's perfectly said about the philosophy of science. I couldn't have said it better myself. Dal, go ahead.
I mean, I think the place where I have the most trouble when it comes to scientific anti-realism, because I think I'm there in every domain except when it comes to biology and like the skepticism you'll find a lot of people use around the instruments that we use to like see cells actually, like, because we can like look through a microscope and see DNA,
right?
And so it's weird to me to say that biology doesn't exist in a real sense.
Yeah. I mean, so this is like one of the big problems for an anti-realist, or at least a constructive empiricist, is going to be like, what are the grounds for drawing a line between the observables and the unobservables in the way that you do, right? Like, so there's this famous argument from Grover Maxwell where he says, look, there's like a continuous series from picking up a magnifying glass, like looking at something through a magnifying glass, and surely we all agree that we can, magnifying glasses reveal what's going on in the world. There's a continuous series from like magnifying glass to optical microscope to electron microscope to atomic force microscope. And yeah, I mean, so this is an issue. I think that there are plausible answers to it. So the kind of line that I'm inclined to take is to say, well, when we look at something through a magnifying glass or an optical microscope, the thing to notice is that these instruments do not kind of create physical objects for inspection. So, I take a magnifying glass and it's just a lens, and then it's revealing something through the lens. The optical microscope will work the same way. On the other hand, if you take something like an electron microscope or an atomic force microscope, you don't sort of put your eye to a lens. The microscope is an instrument which creates something new. It creates this new object. I mean, in principle, it could be. It's usually an image. In principle, I suppose it could be anything. But we usually create an image for inspection, and so that seems to me to be a relevant difference between these types of instruments. And maybe that goes some way towards resolving that problem. I think as well, you've got to bear in mind that when you use these sorts of instruments, it's not the case that you just pick them up and wear them like you might wear a pair of glasses. I mean, when you reveal phenomena using an atomic force microscope, for instance, there's a lot of processing that's required. You actually have to create a sample, and then you have to process the sample in various ways to make sure that it can be read by the instrument properly. So it's not that we're just kind of passively receiving information from the world at that point. Like, we're actively intervening in the world to kind of create these things, basically.
Mm-hmm. It's what do you call that? Observer and observed simultaneously, kind of metaphorically.
I guess it's at least there's sort of there's more going on than just observation. Maybe I'd actually put it that way.
Okay.
At least when you use stuff like an electron microscope or an atomic force microscope.
Exactly. Yeah. Perry, did you have a good formulated question? Because we were just talking about your Is Logic Normative video, and we were going back and forth about it, and I wanted to ask you some questions. I wanted to ask, for you to dive deeper into error and demarcation. And Perry, what did you have?
Oh, I didn't have anything as of now, but that would be nice if you, and not to disrupt the conversation that you and Delsu are having. I'm very interested in the scientific realism aspects of everything. But I mean, were you guys talking about it earlier, that the normative stuff? I mean, I came in
No.
a little bit late, but
No, we it's just been Dal and him kind of going back and forth there for a little bit. I guess we could ask, what's the question that was on the video that was my important one? It was why we ought not believe false premises, why we ought not believe false propositions or false beliefs, right? That's not in logic itself, correct?
Personally, I don't think that any ought claim is in logic itself.
Okay, I agree.
But no, logic isn't going to tell you that you ought not to believe false things. So logic can sort of tell you, if you believe a certain set of false propositions, then logic might be able to tell you what is entailed by those propositions.
Mm-hmm.
But whether or not you ought to believe them is, I think, a separate question.
I think so.
So you can actually, logic is sort of it's a sort of universal tool in the sense that you can kind of apply it to anything. So you can work out the logical consequences of a particular fictional story, for instance. I can work out what's logically entailed by what is written in The Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
Now, if somebody says that they believe The Lord of the Rings is true, maybe I have objections to that. But it doesn't seem like the objection is going to come from logic itself.
No.
Yeah.
It's going to be some kind of ought claim. I guess with that. Well, Perry, go ahead. I forgot what I was going to say, buddy.
no, I mean, go for it. One thing that I guess I would ask is, what is descriptive in this universe that we live in?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and that's not entirely clear to me. So I'm just kind of taking it for granted that we have an understanding of what the distinction is between descriptive claims and normative claims, right? And but the problem is that when you ask for a specific definition of it, you always end up kind of working in a circle where you sort of say, well, So for something to be descriptive is for it to just be, non-normative, or for it to be descriptive is for it to concern facts, not values. But then if you say facts, not values, then someone who's a realist is going to come along and say, well, values are part of facts. Right? So
Yeah,
I,
I've heard that one before. I've heard that one before.
exactly. So I would say, well, look, a descriptive claim is a claim that is going to tell you the way the world actually is,
Right.
not necessarily the way the world ought to be. So a descriptive claim is a claim that will, for instance, attribute this doesn't quite work, but I was going to sort of say attribute a property to an object, but obviously there can be normative properties as well. So
Maybe the speed
yeah,
of
I don't
light.
know. Well, yeah, so we can give examples, right? We can say grass is green is a descriptive claim.
That's what I was saying earlier,
Yeah.
Thomas.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so a general characterization is kind of hard to give. But like I said, I think it's, if you're making claims about what's good or bad, you're making claims about what ought or ought not to be the case, then you're in the realm of the normative.
It seems like
What
ought
should and
is
should not be the case.
ought is the important word to use to decipher these kind of things. Ought or
Yeah.
should, or when
Yeah, that's the normative.
differentiating descriptive and then prescriptive, or normative.
Yeah, normative prescriptive is the oughts and the shoulds. It's the fact value distinction in epistemology is an offshoot of the is ought problem brought up by David Hume. So it's kind of it's very similar. It's associated with it. It's not the exact same thing, but no. What I was going to ask you was on your video. So you were saying that with damn, I wish I wrote down these notes now. I'm like, no, there's not going to be any notes. And then
I feel the same way all the time. I always forget.
And then
I always
it'll
forget
come
everything.
10 minutes later when it's
Yeah.
too late.
So I started off a minute ago. You ought not believe falsehoods. That's not a part of logic. And then the video goes on. I'm cutting through the video here because I remember some of my questions. So not any theory. No, that was the mathematical principle you gave.
Are you thinking
So
of? Yeah, go for it.
go ahead. No,
Well,
you're
I was
okay.
going to say the P, if P then Q, but P doesn't equal Q. Is that what?
Oh,
you
you
were
talking about affirming the consequent?
I was just trying to help you figure out what maybe your question was from what we
No,
were
you're
watching.
it was something specific in error. I think it was,
Oh, okay.
it's our error that we think, because he says descriptive laws tell us how things in fact behave. Descriptive laws cannot be broken, right? The laws of physics are descriptive laws. If we observe something moving faster than light, we would simply conclude that this is not a law, that nothing moves faster, that we were in error. Is that correct, Kane?
Yeah, that's the idea. I'm not sure exactly. It sounded like you were kind of maybe quoting a specific part of the video there.
Yeah. I've been looking at it all day,
just
just kind of getting some questions and stuff, and I've just kind of made some marks and stuff and written some couple of things.
Yeah.
Down,
So but the general idea, I guess, is that in the case of descriptive laws, so descriptive laws, you can't violate them. You cannot break the laws of physics.
Yeah.
Whereas the thought is, at least for people who say that logic is normative, they would say, oh, well, you can break the laws of logic. In fact, people do it all the time because people are very poor at reasoning. Right?
So I like the little you have this one where it says it's a syllogism. It says premise 1, either the laws of logic are descriptive or they are normative. Premise 2, descriptive laws cannot be violated. Premise 3, logical laws are frequently violated. Conclusion 1, so logical laws are not descriptive, so logical laws are normative.
Right. Yeah.
So you had a problem with P3, that logical laws are frequently violated. Is that the one that was problematic in your understanding on that?
I think that for those of us who want to resist the idea that logic is normative, I think that's the premise that would be the easiest to attack. So the idea is that when people engage in reasoning errors, they're violating the laws of logic. But you have to be a bit careful here because when we say that something is a law of logic, so if we take, for instance, modus ponens, so if
Yeah.
P then Q, P therefore Q, right? So
Yep.
we take it that that's a law of logic. What we're saying is that the truth of the premises guarantees the truth of the conclusion. And if you want to give some sort of counterexample to that, if you want to say that that law has been violated, then you'd have to give an example of where you have true premises and a false conclusion. So you'd have to give an example of where if P then Q is true, P is true, and Q is false. Now, somebody who is engaging in poor reasoning hasn't given an example of that, right? They're just mistaken about what the laws of logic actually are. So I think we can say that that's not really a violation of the laws of logic. That seems plausible to me, at least.
Okay. Universe. We've got we have our friend G in here. G, do you have a question, my friend, my brother?
No, not a question, but I will say the nature of the modus ponens, why that's considered a sort of a law of logic, I think was stated rather beautifully by Kane just now. A lot of people don't really understand whenever we say something like, like modus ponens is universally valid. They don't really understand what that means. It's like, if I arrange this in a truth table, it's always going to be tautological in nature, right? And basically, as long as you have the info to sort of plug into your P's and your Q's, as long as that's true, then deductively, it's always going to be true in like a very tautological manner. So you don't really get people that kind of understand that about the universality of modus ponens. And I think Kane just sort of touched on it rather beautifully.
Excellent.
Oh, thanks.
Excelente. We've got other questions. We have more questions for you, sir. if you'll have us.
Just a quick thing. If I take the link to this, the web page link,
Yes.
can I just post that directly, or do I need a different link to get people in here?
Delsu, do you know?
I don't know. I'm on mobile too, or I would.
Travis.
I know if there's some dots that say more.
Okay, wait.
Somewhere on
Travis,
your screen.
Travis says post
says,
directly.
Oh, post directly. Okay.
He just says post directly.
I'll just try that. I'm going to try to whack this on my Discord as well because there might be some.
Yeah, it'll probably take people to like a register or sign up kind of thing, and then it'll go to the channel afterward. I'm assuming. If not, they can just click it again after they sign up.
See what happens.
Well, okay. I don't want to be boring to everybody and take up Kane's time because we do have. I mean, Kane, I could talk to you all day about this stuff.
It doesn't matter. You can take up my time. I am not doing anything else tonight.
Okay, good, because we on my shows we like to have a group study and a big bunch of people involved. I haven't asked Scott. Scott, are you even here, brother? Scott.
He's going up against Magnus Carlsen right now.
He's
probably.
going up. He's playing chess, bro. I know him too well. He's definitely playing chess. Okay, well, so we get error. Now, can you explain to me, let's see, skip forward in the video here, because I care very much about the logic
One
as
was
an orbit
pluralism, if I remember
yeah,
correctly.
well, I wanted to get to demarcation first. How do we demarcate logic from other disciplines? Why is it distinct from psychology? Why is it? And then there are reasons that you say, what's the name of that person? Something Russell?
This is probably Gillian Russell. Is that it? Yeah,
Gillian Russell. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Gillian Russell is one of the sort of defenders of the anti-normative view. There's another good paper by a guy called Ivar Labucht. I think I'm probably pronouncing his name incorrectly, but his paper is called "Is Logic Distinctly Normative?" So yeah, I mean, those sort of two people were probably they were the main influences on this particular video.
I'm not going to ask you, of course, where you fall, but what do you lean towards in terms of the demarcation idea? What do you think?
So how do we? So the question of like, how exactly do we do it? How do we demarcate logic from other disciplines?
I mean, I understand all the way
Yeah.
going all the way to metaphysics, epistemology, all that. I get all that, but then I think the answer. Well, go ahead. I don't want to. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that my inclination is to say that there really isn't a strict demarcation between logic and other disciplines. I think that, like, so the reason, so if there is a strict demarcation, I think it would come about from the fact that logic is just highly abstract, and logic is concerned with, so it's concerned with like truth preservation, and because it's concerned with truth preservation, this is something which is it's like it concerns every other discipline of inquiry, because obviously, you know, if you're doing history, for instance, then, you know, you're going to be interested in like, well, how do I get to the truths about history? That's just one of the main things you're going to be interested in. If you're doing biology, you're interested in how to get to the truths about biology, right? So logic is concerned with these like general patterns of truth preservation, and, you know, therefore it's at this much more general level. But I'm not really so inclined to see logic as being like fundamentally demarcated from other disciplines. I mean, this is maybe getting a little bit off the. It's a bit of a tangent to what I was talking about in that particular video, but I'm inclined to think of like logic as a sort of more of a tool that we can use, and that so there are a whole bunch of like alternative logics. So you know, in classical logic, for instance, in classical logic, if you have a contradiction, everything follows from it. So contradictions entail everything. And so if you've got a contradiction and you're using classical logic, you're just completely screwed up. I mean, you're not going to be able to do it.
The principle of explosion and dialetheism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But then there are these but the thing is that there are contexts where you might actually want to reason with contradictions, because so in science, for instance, there are arguably cases where we have inconsistent models that can be quite useful. So it's sometimes argued that the Bohr model of the atom is inconsistent. Some people have denied that, but, you know, that's possibly the case. So in that case, it's like, okay, well, we probably want to have some sort of para-consistent logic that can allow us to reason with this. And, you know, and like I'm quite happy with that. I'm quite happy to sort of think, yeah, you know, we can, like, logic is a tool. You choose the right tool for the job.
Right.
And
even in para-consistent logic, though, it's still logic, right? It's still a logic, a formal system, even though it's dealing with dialethia, you know, or dialethia.
Yeah, I mean, the backbone behind para-consistent, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the primary focus is figuring out how to avoid explosion.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yes, of course, it's going to be logic. That's the whole point. It's like, how do we keep this without it exploding? Right. Yeah. That's the whole point.
Yeah. Logic being normative is a big thing for me, because I think it has to be there before you can even understand what metaphysics is. Or even before the utterances coming out of our mouths in sentences is logic. You know what I mean? So normativity abounds for me in logic. And I'm kind of like Cain. I'm kind of deep in it there. You know, I'm trying to understand where I stand on it.
I do have a question to that, though. If language and everything is based on logic, how did we... I think it's pretty well agreed upon that we had language before we had any sort of codified logic, right?
Well, I mean, the logical absolutes were there whether we acknowledge them or not. I mean, the laws of thought, sorry.
So they're objective.
Well, they're innate tools in our toolbox from biology, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I probably have a slightly different take on it, because I tend to see logics as sort of more like... I tend to look at it more that logic is a kind of abstraction from like natural language. So in other words, I think I would tend to think that, you know, natural language and natural reasoning, the sort of just reasoning that goes on in people's heads, like that comes first, as it were, and then we have these useful tools that we've developed to formalize all of that stuff. But I don't tend to think that like there's sort of laws of what should I say, like laws of logic, like built into our thought. I mean, I guess it like maybe depends on what counts
No, you may
as
be
a
right.
law of logic, right?
You may be right. Yeah, that.
But
may
certainly,
be
if we're thinking of it as a
thing.
formal system, I'm probably
But in that formal system, would two be greater than one, right? So like that the natural reasoning that a human being would have, you would obviously recognize that two is greater than one.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where. I mean, does that count as a formal system? I'm not.
Like I don't know. I guess it'd just be like a piece of a formal system. I guess of mathematics, because mathematics is a logical based system.
If you are a logicist, dun dun dun. Yeah, just for the hell of it, in the philosophy of mathematics, you can be a logicist, where you think mathematics derives directly from the rules of logic or the absolutes or whatever you want to call them, or you could be an intuitionist, where you think there's separate magisteria that evolve together. Which is really weird when I learned about it, but I don't know which one. I guess I'm a logicist, I guess.
I mean, think of it in like a sort of, in the sense of a structural synthesis, right? I mean, like what it is that we correspond logic to, right? And like you got to remember, logic is a linguistic, symbolic process, right? What it is that we're corresponding that those symbols and that language to, that all of those things are going to be present in the universe without us having corresponded it, right? We call it a law if it is consistent across time and reliable for its correspondence, right? So 1 + 1 equaling 2 deductively is always going to be the case, right? But it was always going to be the case long before we ever corresponded any of these symbols to it, right? So of course 2 is always going to be more than 1.
Well, so were you saying that that's the case, like just in the universe, independently, like that's something we find out, and that we then find that our thoughts correspond to that?
Yeah, I'd say whenever.
Understand?
Yeah, no, I'd say if we're taking an account of, say, what would you say, material units of things, yeah, that's going to be part of the universe.
So what about this sort of case? So I quite like the idea that we sort of elaborate mathematics and logic from the basis of experience, so we just have experience of material things, and then that's what gives us at least the foundations for starting off on the game of mathematics. But the problem I always come across is things like this. So what if I take like a drop of water and another drop of water, and then I put them together? Well, now it looks like I've got just one drop of water. And so, when I say that, okay, I have one thing and I have another thing, and so I have two things, it seems like I have to be choosing to look at particular types of systems, and I have to be choosing to interpret them in particular ways.
Yeah.
And I'm not. You see what I'm saying? Like, because if I take the
Sure,
sort of two bits of water coming together, then it looks like I've got 1 + 1 = 1.
Well, kind of. I mean, it depends on the
there's
nature and properties of that specific system, right? So that specific system that you're talking about doesn't operate like, say, rocks, right? You're not going to be able to do that with, say, 2 rocks. Does that make sense? Right? Like you can do it with water because of the nature of the properties and the behavior of those systems specifically, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, so I see what you're saying, but then it looks like and maybe this isn't a problem, but then it looks like we're no longer thinking of these kind of arithmetical operations as being universal in any sense. Again, that might not be a problem, because actually, I mean, there are a whole bunch of alternative mathematical systems. I mean, there's modular arithmetic as well as standard arithmetic, right? So
Sure.
maybe the universe just instantiates a whole bunch of all of these systems.
Yeah, but I would say that wouldn't be the case if we actually could take an account of, units of water, so to speak. But we actually kind of can't. It only works on a sort of macro level. But if we could take an account of those systems, each of them, system by system, yeah, we would be able to quantize them. Just like we do with everything else, right?
Something that I find interesting is to Kane's point. Maybe less about 2 drops of water is more like I know Conscious will have the same response, I think, which makes sense. But like think about a black hole where instead of same sort of thing as water, but instead of just 2 drops of water, it's everything becomes one, right? In the long run of a black hole, everything gets sucked in, and it becomes one singular unit.
It all becomes spaghettified into just the atoms. So just a real quick little jump in question here. Can language happen without logic?
I mean, I'm inclined to think it can because I'm inclined to think of logic as a sort of formal,
Okay.
like a formal abstraction.
I fucked up
that-
there. General reasoning is necessary for language, right? Maybe
yeah,
not like
maybe.
a formal system of logic, but some kind of reasoning structure, perhaps, or something like that.
I suppose it depends on what counts as reasoning, because it does look like there's quite a lot of language which doesn't really fit into the mold of what we would at least conventionally think of as reasoning. I mean, if I like slam the door on my foot and I just like scream out, I swear a lot, right? Well, I'm using language and I'm expressing something, but it doesn't seem like there's any reasoning going on. I mean, I guess maybe you might want to postulate that there's some sort of subconscious reasoning process.
Yeah, there might be some like neurobiological or neurochemical reasons, but I get what you mean.
When I think I get your point though, Thomas. Like like you'd have to have a way to like reason the differentiation of things to know.
Well, there's symbols in language, you know what I mean, and there's semantics and semiotics in language, and syntax. That's the only reason I would say that some kind of general reasoning would have to be there before language would form.
I would say even before that, even just the grunts people made on the plains to like indicate something was a tiger or something was an elephant, right? It's like long
3
before
grunts for tiger.
Exactly.
I mean, a lot of your basic reasoning happens without you even initializing any sort of design thought or executive function, right? The whole neural system that we call the human brain is predicated on sort of a broad series of deductive processes, right? So basically, you can get a sort of heteronomy going with stuff like just systems of any kind, right? Without needing a sort of formalized, systematic dissemination of those skills, so to speak, right? And you meet people all the time that are like, it sounds like they're reasoning, but behind that, you're wondering, how does this person even make it through the day? How does he make it to the other side of tomorrow? All right. So, yeah, there's reasoning there, but it doesn't have to be formalized in the manner that you're talking about, Thomas.
Are you calling
Bad
that
reasoning
instinct?
is a disease. I'm sorry, what?
Are you calling that instinct, G?
Yeah, well, there is. Well, I mean, you could call it that. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of your instinct that is reasoning processes that you don't have any control over.
I mean,
Our heuristics are
reasoning?
those. I'm sorry.
No, he was making a distinction between, right, like logic as a system and
the formal and then the general.
Right. Yeah, most people can learn basic systems as long as they have sort of a deductive flow, so to speak, because that's basically what the brain's doing anyway, right? Because that's the kind of universe that we live in, and that's the kind of universe that gave rise to us in either evolution or whatever the hell is going on here.
I got you. Dow, did you have a jump in here?
I had about 5, and now they're all mixed together, and I don't know what I was going to ask you.
It doesn't matter. Start babbling some shit off.
Yeah, something that occurs to me is like, because we're talking about like how your brain will kind of like you look at a tree, your brain will almost naturally automatically differentiate that tree from the ground, let's say, because the tree sticks up out of the ground, so there's something else going on there. But then you can learn some other system like plant biology or whatever, and you'll learn that like the soil beneath the tree is integral to the survival of the tree, obviously, and like a caveman might not know that. So how you divide and I think Kane released a video on this like the other day about how like how you divide the actual world is kind of up to you. Like a caveman might see a tree as the same thing as the ground or completely separate from the ground, and then a biologist might see them as inexorably linked, and then a guy who's trying to ignore classification in general and just looking at atoms might separate the different chemicals that the tree makes up and say those are the actual real things. So
Hmm.
it's like if we're trying to determine what the like heteronormative or whatever the word would be for the like
Yes.
mental the cognitive thing that's having us divide things up in a normative way, which one is the normative one? Should it be the biological, the chemical, the atomic, the visual, the color, the lines? What
It's
like
all
what?
tied together, I think. But Kane, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so I tend to take a sort of nominalist view of like kinds and classification in general. So my line is, well, I think that like there's a traditional kind of metaphor that's used in philosophy, where they talk about carving nature at its joints. And
Hmm.
so the thought is that there are these, there's like objective distinctions out there in the world, and then the point of our theories is to track these objective distinctions. I tend to be on the more sort of anti-realist side about this. I tend to think, well, um, it's really sort of up to us how we choose to carve up the world. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, with like something like if I'm looking at say trees, well, maybe I'm trying to map the edge of a forest. And I might say, oh, okay, well, like there's a forest that becomes a field or something like that. Okay, how exactly do I draw the line between the forest and the field? It's going to, first of all, it's going to depend on what the like scope of my inquiry is. I mean, am I looking at this over the course of a year, for instance, or only in a single day? Because over the
Mm.
course of a year, the boundary will change
Yeah.
through the seasons. Similarly, there's a whole bunch of different boundary properties. So you can look at like the gradient of the plant species. You can look at the gradient of light hitting the ground, gradients of heat, all of that. And of course, they're gradients; they're not sharp lines. And so, I guess with this sort of example, it might seem a little bit kind of it just might seem a little bit trivial, right? Like, well, of course, there isn't, an exact boundary between like a forest and a field. That's obvious. But I think that this sort of issue actually just kind of arises over and over and over and over and over again, like pretty much wherever we look. And um, and so I think that it is like actually quite a deep problem, or not really a problem, but it just um, it has sort of deep consequences for how we choose to represent the world.
I agree.
That's basically my line on it. Yeah.
I agree with that very much so. Yeah, very much so. We're going to start taking callers here in just a little bit. I just wanted to make sure all of our speakers had that. I know a lot of our speakers had questions, so I wanted to get those out of the way before we started taking anybody. Scott, did you have anything else? G, Dal, Perry, Perry, did you have?
I did have a question for Kane.
Yeah.
So along those lines, do you think there's like any like holistic way of looking at things? Not holistic in terms of like hippy dippy shit, like in terms of like looking at things like uh, as the
Hey.
whole of everything. You know what I mean? Like that you can take in all parts, so you're not necessarily worried about how you're breaking or subdividing individual systems to come up with your explanations for where the tree line is. Right there, like a
Um,
holistic way of like saying, okay, here's the way humans think. Here's how we can actually break it down. Or do you think that's just a fool's errand?
So I think that so my initial reaction is to say, well, a holistic view of what exactly? So like when you say, for instance, humans, I mean, okay, if we're talking about, biological species, I mean, species is like an easy case for the kind of more nominalist sort of approach to kinds that I have, because obviously, I mean, there aren't. So here's the thing: if you were to sort of look at humans as a whole, then you're going to run into the problem that there just is clearly no straightforward line between humans and the ancestors of humans,
Exactly.
between humans and like maybe other populations that broke off from
Mm-hmm.
humans and maybe they started
Yep.
speciating but didn't fully become another species. Now
Right.
here's this is a good example actually, because it's like if we just focus on if we like restrict our analysis to a particular time, like to today, then actually there is a very clear distinction between human beings and other types of organisms. Or at least I think we can pretty easily find some clear distinctions between human beings and other types of organisms. So it's like we choose a particular scope of inquiry, and then boundaries between things emerge. But actually, like if you try to step back and take I guess you're saying like a more holistic view, I think that's trying to do that. That's where the boundaries sort of disappear. So
Yeah, I
I
was
don't know if
actually
that
going to.
answers the question, but
I was actually. I was going to ask
That's
you. Do you think
that.
if we made contact with those, ancient men, ancient humans, there's people that we don't really know how to differentiate ourselves between. Do you think if we actually like met them, made contact with them? Do you think we'd be able to do that?
I think it's a matter of just decision. So I mean, I think we actually can do it now.
Right.
It's like up to us where we draw the lines. I suspect that if we did meet them, it would probably be driven by moral considerations. I imagine, like, so
Sure.
if it were the case that we were able to interact with these beings, with these organisms, and we were sort of feeling strong emotions for them, and we were able to talk to them and so on, and they could like we've started to feel that they were members of our community, then I think we'd probably just
Right.
say, oh, they're human beings.
Yeah, or at least
Yeah.
in possession of the same thing that renders either the human being or whatever life out there that has it valuable, right? Like if
Yeah,
they
well,
had executive faculty and design thought, then we'd be like, yeah, they're just as good as human beings, if not human beings themselves.
Well, I think we'd probably actually say that they're human beings, and the reason why I say that is because I think the phrase "human being" is kind of morally loaded, and maybe it shouldn't be, right?
Sure,
But
sure.
I think it probably is.
Seems
Yeah,
like
I
it.
would say. I mean, I do it myself, like gladly. Yeah, I morally load that term, right? Like for me, my ethics is specifically human oriented, right?
Right.
So
So I know
Yeah.
exactly what
so
you're saying.
Kane Garrett is not a naive realist, but a pure. What is it?
Well, I mean,
A pure realist.
I call it peak realism.
Peak realism. That's right. Excuse me.
Yeah,
Peak realist.
I would
Cool.
say everything really is real, and we can really make contact with it.
So
Just the same way
phenomenal.
I'm really talking to each of you right now.
Yeah,
Everything,
phenomenal
including
conservatism
unicorns
on.
and.
But no,
Yeah,
those are specifically made to not be real, right?
I was
Those are
I was
fictional.
I was just gonna say it's phenomenal conservatism on overdrive. So
Well, I wouldn't say that, but
I think it is.
it may
Peak
be. It may
realism?
be. Yeah, peak realism.
Yeah, I'll
realism.
entertain it. I shall entertain it.
Are you not entertained?
Are
So
you not
I mean,
entertained?
so seriously though, like, why, if you're a peak realist, why wouldn't you just count like whatever? Why wouldn't you just count imagination as like revealing some other part of reality? So I could have a model where instead of imagination being something that I'm just making up, like when I have a mental image of something, I'm like actually perceiving something in some sort
Sure.
of alternative realm. It looks like that would be like a proper
Yeah,
peak realism, right?
well, no, I would say that how you navigate that territory is you don't focus on the image that you're drawing in your head and actually focus on what the brain is itself doing, right? So each of those images that you're talking about, irrespective of how high resolution or how low resolution, are actually neuronal assemblies, right? That the brain is using to model the universe, however it decides to, either through fabricating or through simple observation, or however you want to model the world. They call these world models in neuroscience.
Right. So
Right.
isn't
So
that? I mean, but that's going to be true for perception as well, right? Like that's just because everything. I mean, even perception is going to involve changes in the brain.
Yep.
yeah, I mean, there's nothing that you ever do that isn't some sort of change in the brain.
Right. Yeah.
Nothing, like at all. There's not a thing.
Yeah, so I guess
Exactly.
I don't see. So I suppose I'm just like, well, okay, looks like we could in the so I perceive a red apple in front of me, right, and then that produces some changes in my brain, and then I can kind of close my eyes and perceive a unicorn, and that causes some changes in my brain, and
Well, how about this?
I'm
Can
like,
you
oh well,
can you
there we go.
perceive a unicorn of a color that you've never made contact with?
I can. So here's an interesting thing. I can create. So I can very easily do this, and I've spoken to other people about this. Some people say they can do it. Some people just think that I'm lying or they can't comprehend what I'm saying. I can see in my head. I can create like both red and green at the same time. So I can't create an entirely new color, but I can very easily create a unicorn that is like both red and green all over at the same time.
I can do it. Yeah, I can do it at the drop of a hat. I can make a little apple that's red on one side and green on the other. Right?
No, I mean all over. Like it's all so the same.
Oh, sure.
surface is
Yeah,
both
that's
red
kind of
and
cool.
green. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool too. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, but see, here's the thing about it though is you're only going to be able to use colors that have, well, one, made contact with you. Like that's it. Like you're not going to be able to use those little bits of the of the violet and indigo parts of the spectrum that we don't have access to. You're not going to be able to incorporate that into your unicorn. Do you see what I'm saying?
And yeah, I mean, so why would that show that the unicorn isn't like real, like in the same way that the apple is?
Well, what do you mean by real? There's no material units. We can't actually observe any sort of effects of the unicorn. We don't know what its properties are besides what it is you're telling us that you're assembling in your head. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, there's no.
I mean,
real...
I'm just kind of going with the look. I mean, I was just going with this like peak realist thing. It seemed to me okay if you want to be like a kind of hardcore like realist across the board, then why not also be a realist about imagination?
Well, I am. I just told you what I was a realist in terms of it as far as imagination, right? Like the brain is actually doing all this, but what it is that you're building with those models inside of your brain are only neuronally real. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I mean, like
Okay.
I take it that that's the sort of that's the
Yeah,
I get the view, right?
Cool.
I'm just not sure I would call it peak realism, but
what would you call it?
I don't know. I would just call it. Oh, okay, that's like a sort of conventional, relatively conventional model of what the world contains. I mean, I'm not putting it down, right? I have the same kind of model. Like, I think there are like red apples. I don't think there are unicorns.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, see, I don't think I would, diminish my views to specifically the discussion on imagination. I don't think that's peak realism. That's just an aspect of peak realism as far as like it coming up in a conversation and how I might address it. You see what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So real quick, one more. You're good, G. Perry, did you have some concerns or questions?
No.
Observations, perhaps?
I would maybe just revert back to the first thing that I asked, and the flip side of that. I mean, we essentially prescribe uh, the language that we use. I mean, in this case, we're talking about logic here, but physics and other parts of science, we prescribe this language that we use. And me and Thomas were talking earlier about the speed of light, right? So, I mean, we've prescribed that to be 186,000 miles per hour
Second,
per second. Sorry. Is that actually the constant? Is that actually the true
like
speed?
dead even,
Or is
one
it
hundred eighty-six
or
thousand,
is it
or yeah.
186,000.02, for a billion decimal places, and then there's a 3 for, 024. So, I
So
mean,
could that be a constant? Could that be descriptive? Is what you're asking?
yeah, this goes back to the descriptive aspect of
Yeah.
it. I mean,
So let's say it's a trillion zeros and then a 3 and then a trillion more zeros and a 2 after that 186,000 miles per second. That's what you're getting at, right?
yeah, and I mean, obviously, it's a pedantic thought, and it is not useful because we obviously have useful measurements for which we use. But the linguistics part of it, what is descriptive and what is prescriptive? I mean, how is it not just all prescriptive?
Yeah. How is it all not normative? I guess.
Well, I guess so. I mean, in that case, the thought would be you're not going to be able to accelerate beyond the speed of light, no matter what you try to do. So it's not like we're saying
Sure.
that you ought not to accelerate beyond the speed of light. We're saying no, you literally just can't do it. I think that okay, there is. I mean, there maybe is an interesting kind of wrinkle here because I take it that like scientific consensus is sort of enforced in some sense. I mean, like, so we have these institutions that like, so we now have this view that the speed of light is such and such, and I won't try to remember the exact constant, but the speed of light is such and such, and it's not possible to accelerate beyond the speed of light.
Sure.
Now, if somebody was to just come along and say, "No, I think the speed of light is 10 miles per hour," I like then they're not going to even get a hearing, right? Like nobody's even going to pay any attention to them.
No.
I suppose it's imaginable that they might have lots of compelling evidence and so on. But the point is if they did that, they would still have to be kind of they would have to be conforming to a whole load of very, very, very strict standards, very, very strict norms. And so, like, I can see an argument being made that, well, maybe like all of the claims to knowledge that we make are really claims that are being sort of enforced by our standards and values in some way. So maybe
Right.
it's normative in that sense.
Right.
Right.
So yeah, I still think there would be a difference between the different types of statement, right? Like there's, like I say, so the descriptive law is something where we say, oh no, it's just not possible for people to violate that. Whereas the normative laws are laws where we think, yeah, people can violate that, and if they do violate them, then we'll ostracize them or throw them in prison or something.
I mean, doesn't the fabric of the universe, isn't that going faster than the speed of light?
Yeah, it's accelerating faster than the speed of light, but we can't.
Can go faster.
I think it's that. So it would be sort of relative to us. So there's like if you look at say a galaxy, I don't know, on the edge of the observable universe, then like that might be. But yeah, that wouldn't. That it's not like it's. There's some sort of technical reason why that doesn't count.
Yeah, I got you.
Object. It's like
I got you. I got you. It's kind of like how space. Anyone who would ask where the center of the universe is, that's a dumb. It's not a dumb question, but it's a weird question because
I mean,
everything
it's
is
me.
expanding from every point equally. So there is no center. But I was going to ask you one thing. So I I can be convinced that most everything is normative. Maybe besides like tautologies or logical axioms or things like that. And even then, I can. So I struggle myself to know what is not normative because that's one of the truths that I seek. What things aren't prescribed by me, you know. And when I try to separate them, the description and the prescription, that's when I get into trouble. When I try to think of it as some kind of synthesis, then it kind of makes a little bit more sense, but then it's more confusing. So I don't really know where to stand on that. What do you think, Kane?
So you said the issue was it was about like them being prescribed by you. Can you elaborate
Yeah.
a little bit more on that? Like, so
Oh, like
do you
logic,
mean like
like.
a?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I was just thinking about like, so if we take a kind of what would traditionally be considered a descriptive statement that grass is green, right? Like, so what would be the sort of normativity or the when you say it's like
Well,
prescribed by
colorblind
you, what
people.
does that mean?
Colorblind people, it wouldn't be green. You know what I mean? So technically,
Right.
green, even though all average humans would see green, there's still a blip of a problem there. You know what I mean? Uh, a descriptive fact would be, to me, is that water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit in atmosphere. You know what I mean? So, is there any way that I could think of that as being normative? That's where I struggle, is to understand if there's like a synthesis that there can be some. I don't know.
Um, so So I think that with the grass is green example and there being colorblind people, um, I would have thought that I don't know. I mean, the way I look at that is it's just that you have like a different type of experience to them, and so you are kind of maybe carving up the world differently to how they carve it up. Um, but I guess I'm not sure where the normativity is there. I
Okay.
will also say that with respect to the water boiling thing, so okay, grass is green. It seems like it's not going to be true universally. Like maybe that's the issue. Okay, so
Sure.
we have a particular type of visual system, and that's what leads us to endorse the claim that grass is green, but somebody who's colorblind doesn't. I think that the claim that water boils at 100 degrees. Actually, there are very similar problems with that kind of statement as well. So it turns out that water doesn't always boil at 100 degrees because there's a phenomenon of superheating. If you put water in a microwave, I mean, this is actually genuinely something that is quite dangerous. So you're not supposed to put
Okay.
water in a microwave because you can superheat it. You can get it above 100 degrees and it won't boil. And then when you take it out of the microwave, it explodes in your
Oh.
face. Um,
Okay. Shit.
and yeah. And then similarly, you get this like dependence on other properties as well. So it's going to depend on like how many impurities there are in the water.
Mhm.
Bear in mind, you never have a perfectly pure sample of water.
No. 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 No.
Um,
No.
so and so what exactly what the impurities are in the water, that's going to change the
Yeah.
exact boiling temperature. So actually, when we say like water boils at 100 degrees, I think that I think even with that one, there is a kind of imposition of order on our part, right? Like we are
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
idealizing to some extent and imposing order
Yeah.
on a messy phenomenon.
Maybe the physicists can ignore this, but us philosophers, we can't ignore it. We can't ignore
I
it.
know. I don't think the physicists should ignore it either. I think. I mean,
No, I don't
like
think they should.
superheating is an interesting physical phenomenon.
No, I was just
Yeah.
speaking in general terms. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. That is a super interesting phenomena, and I should go look into it. I am going to let you to the wolves now for for our callers, and haven't even really been looking at it. I've been trying to pay attention to you and seeing your hand motions and stuff because I like talking to people. I wish I could be on camera, but if nobody else up here had anything to say, I'm going to let our next caller, who is Marcus, come on. Does anybody else have anything else they wanted to add?
I mean, if I learned anything, it's not to put water in the microwave. So I appreciate that.
I'm not.
Well,
I'm
you
not
just
going
got
to
to be
do it
smart
either.
about it. I mean, I do it all the time for coffee.
30 seconds, nothing more.
I put it in there for 3 minutes.
It's probably fine. I think if you use like distilled water in like a glass container or something, that can be a bit dangerous, but it'll probably be fine.
All
I
right.
have one thing I want to say before we turn it over to Marcus here. And it hopefully this doesn't derail everything. I know I'm assuming you're still kind of egoist in your moral the way you divide things up morally, because I remember seeing a few
Um,
animal rights
Oh, I would like to
videos?
hear about that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I think I've sort of changed my mind about that. I don't really
Oh,
endorse any particular moral theory anymore, and I don't sort of see. I don't really see the point, as it were, in trying to like engage in moral theorizing. I mean, and partly, I don't think. I think, to be honest, I've never really been that. It's never really been something that's close to my heart. Part of the reason why I did it was just because people asked me to, right? So, like, a lot of people
Mm,
were asking about my moral views on things, and so I thought, well, yeah, okay, let's put the philosopher's hat on, and come up with a moral theory, and try to make it consistent with all my other views and all that. But actually. It's not something I really identify with anymore. I've certainly shifted my views, or at least my feelings on animals. I think I have a lot more sympathy for animals now.
I do for
And
cows more than I ever have.
yeah, so
I
I mean, I
really
can't
do.
really, I can't, although I would say, I don't necessarily reject the, I don't know, intellectual content of what I said before. I just don't emotionally resonate. It doesn't resonate with me anymore.
I feel you. Uh, Dal,
well,
was that
then
it
that
before you wanted
defeats
to?
my question. Yeah, that
What was the
that
question?
question didn't
Out of
make any
interest.
sense.
I
I
mean,
mean,
just out of interest, what was the question?
I wanted to make an argument because I've heard you say like I don't. And sorry if my internet cuts out; it's being wonky. But I've heard you say things like I don't want to live in a society where murderers are allowed to run free. Let's say so. I would like them to jail murderers so that I don't potentially get murdered. And with
Right.
your animal right, your previously held animal rights views, quote unquote, I was going to try to make the argument that, like, if we met an alien species that had, that looked at your views on animal rights and came in and judged us based on the way we were judging things, they could create, like they could do to us what we do to cows, let's say, or
Oh
something.
yeah, 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 absolutely. I
But
mean,
that was
yeah, I think I would probably just accept that they could do that.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
in fact, I would say that right now. Like, yeah, I mean, so they could do it. Would I and would I sort of morally approve of it? Well, I mean, no. I think that what I would have said back then, if you were talking to Kane, 1 year ago, then what he would say is, well, the idea of the sort of moral framework that I was using, it was kind of a contractarian sort of framework where I was saying that like moral rules are rules that are developed by rational agents, like in order to maximize their like long run self interest.
Hmm.
And I think I would have probably tried to say, well, the morally relevant property is rationality. And
Right.
even if the aliens are more intelligent than us, stronger than us, we still do have the property of rationality. So we
Hmm.
still
Yeah,
count.
well,
You don't
like
have to be perfectly rational. You just have to like be able to think about rules and think about the consequences of adopting rules. That's all you need.
yeah, so
Makes
Um,
complete
I
sense.
think I think where I would come back at that would be to say, how do we know that cows don't have some very limited form of rationality and we're just so
mm.
far above them that we're judging it as non rational? And why couldn't an alien species come in and do the same thing to us, basically?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I mean, I can kind of see that like there seem to be cases where animals like engage in what we might think of as kind of proto moralistic,
Yeah.
proto moral sort of behavior. Like so,
Yeah.
there are cases where like I've seen videos of dogs defending people, right? Like, so somebody will be attacked by another person, the dog runs in and defends the person. And I mean, I guess you can say, well, look, that's just the dog's just acting on instinct. I find it hard to believe that the dog is like actually thinking through a rule and like thinking about how it would want other people to behave. But I mean,
There's weird shit,
I don't
man.
know.
Like there's been bears that would carry like small deer across on their back across waterways. I've seen that shit. There's other weird shit that that doesn't seem like it would be in the animal kingdom, but it is. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, that last thing that Kane just said is what I would really, really highlight on this topic, right? Well, two things really, but the last thing that Kane said basically is the animal conducting itself internally in that sense? One, right? Is it actually engaging in ethical deliberation of some kind? And two, is it engaging in ethical deliberation that is not ours, right? In the sense that why would we view those things that the animal's doing as ethical, as opposed to merely an extension of our ethical deliberation being projected onto the animal, right? So basically, with those two,
So anthropomorphism.
yeah, anthropomorphizing ethics, right? So we don't actually have any means by which to determine whether or not animals are engaging in ethical deliberation, and even if we could, there's no guarantee that they would ethically deliberate in exactly the same way that we would, which is why we're extending to them these sort of like ethical views. Do you see kind of what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I guess it could. I mean, so wouldn't this sort of objection here be that there's like a, it's like a prudential argument, right? It's like, well, maybe we don't really know what's going on inside these animal minds, but like we should probably err on the side of caution.
Yes.
If we're going to be using rationality as the criterion by which to determine moral status, then we want to. It's not really a big deal if we include some things that aren't rational, but if we end up excluding some things that are rational, then that would be pretty terrible. By our own lights.
But what would be the cautionary aspect of this, right? Like if I'm going to be erring on the side of caution, what's the point of caution?
Well, the point is that so the thought is that by your own. So again, I'm imagining here somebody who says that rationality is the criterion of moral status. If you're going for just like egoism or something, then this is completely irrelevant. But like if you think that rationality is what matters, then if it's the case that the animal does have some rudimentary rationality, then by the lights of your moral system, that animal has moral status. And then if you cause it immense suffering, then you've done something very, very bad by your own
100%,
standards.
100%. Yes, 100%. Like if we could actually determine, as in get evidence of and proof of any specific species out there actually deliberating on ethical terms, yes, they would immediately be incorporated into the ethical fold, like wholesale, right? But as far as between now and that time, there's literally no evidence across all species to conclude that they are, in fact, engaging in ethical deliberation. And two, that what we are calling ethical deliberation isn't merely our projection, right? So I don't really know where the point of caution would be in this equation.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I'm just sort of granting, for the sake of argument, that there is some evidence for this. And by evidence, I just mean there are some phenomena that like raise the probability of the hypothesis, something in that sense, right?
Right.
Now, I actually don't really care. Like, I'm not, I don't really commit myself to this. I'm just kind of granting it for the sake of argument. But like,
every time I say that to people, they get mad at me.
We will not make you die on any hills, my friend.
Yeah.
No hills to be died on here. You're good.
You're not Jesus tonight, friend.
Look, I mean, you can totally get mad at me if you want. I mean, that's no problem. I don't mind.
Every time I tell people, I'm like, I don't really care about that. Man, they get mad. I'm just glad that I have a fellow non-carer.
Well, yeah, because I mean, look, my stance on animals now is just like I just have like a kind of emotional response to them. Like that's it. I just sort of, I just care about them. There's no further reason for it. So I mean, it just doesn't matter whether they're rational or not.
I agree. I mean, I care about my dogs and cats. I do. Even if they're not ethically deliberating, I care about them.
Yeah, I've got this dog. I mean, I was never a dog or pet person. I swear to God, I've got this dog that, like, if you ever invaded my home and threatened me and my dog, there'd be some serious consequences, right? And on the dog's behalf, it's very strange.
Yeah.
The
but,
dog
I mean,
might
we've
cause
gotten
some
into
people
this.
serious consequences.
No, he's so tiny, man.
Sorry,
I
Dal.
think
Go
you
ahead,
and
Dal.
me argued about this once before, G, and so I don't want it to turn into that again. But
Yes.
I would like to voice my I believe that the null hypothesis should lead us to conclude that animals would have more potential to do that, because humans are an example of an animal that makes moral deliberations, and since that's our only example of we have no evidence that any animals in particular, or at least most animals in particular, don't. I would think
Well,
that we should err not only on the side of caution, but with the null hypothesis, which would say,
Dal, I mean, I hate to be this guy, but in this particular instance, the null hypothesis wouldn't be what you're talking about. The null hypothesis would be that aspect of us exploring whether or not animals are conducting themselves. That like we don't even know how to put it in there, but it's going to be the aspect that straight up doesn't change the entire exploration, right? It's something that we're testing the hypotheses against. It's not going to be what you're talking about, and just hands-off kind of style that you just described. Does that make sense? Like, you're not actually accurately identifying the null hypothesis in this exploration.
so I just disagree with that. Let's move on to Marcus.
Kane is our guest. If he wants to say anything, he gets.
I did actually just want to add something about this because I don't know whether this changes the. It's just something that occurred to me, right? So when you were talking about the null hypothesis and how you choose what the null hypothesis is, it does occur to me that there's been this very long history going back, 500 years of scientists investigating animals and consistently underestimating their capacities. It seems like every decade it turns out oh no, animals are actually much more sophisticated than we thought they were.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Actually, well, there's actually a whole domain of neuroscientists that are actually on this question, right? Animal neuroscientists.
So you disbelieve by default that they have any ethical deliberation until you see evidence of ethical deliberation? Is that where you're coming from?
Yeah, it's mainly that I would have actually no reason to have postulated the idea to begin with, right?
Okay.
So unless there's some reason, right, to have postulated it, like if the neuroscientists come together and they're like, "Hey, check out this data. We found it. It's a smoking gun." They're on our level, right? Then I'm going to be more inclined towards following that domain of science.
How bad would you feel about all the cheeseburgers you ate then?
I wouldn't. I would simply move to quit doing what I was doing. And
no, I get it. Yeah.
It would be species by species too. It's not like all animals here, right? Like
what if cattle were ethically deliberating though? I mean, that would technically make us.
Oh, I would straight up stop eating them, and I would fight for their entitlements. No shit.
Okay. I just had to get your bearings on that.
Yeah, okay. I feel like I've tried to convey that over our talks. I feel like maybe I have failed to, but yes.
No, you haven't. You haven't failed, dude.
Gents, if I finally fucking may, I've been waiting for an hour now, and we're applying Kantian metaphysics and metaethics to fucking dogs. Come on, let's actually talk about the metaphysics here, because I have a few questions for you, Kane.
I wasn't talking about Kantian. I mean, maybe other people were talking about Kantian ethics.
Nobody was talking.
I think all of you were, and I'll tell you why. You pointed out specifically you sort of the theories which you subscribe to of physics, right? Infinitesimal space, etc. And of course, Newtonian physics and Kant himself had to subscribe to in order to even prove his a priori univertesimal morality. In the objectives, in his writings on the metaphysics of objective reality, or objective morality, excuse me, he clearly writes on this. He clearly subscribes to this idea of a space existing outside of the monad, which is cognition, which acts as universality, supranational a priori, and applies itself upon all forms of metaphysics. I pointed out that specifically in your address of science and the scientific method, etc., you did not at all address science as fiction, or for that matter, any of these cultural appropriations of the world as nature as cultural fiction, specifically language.
Marcus,
It's
he
not
doesn't have
systematic
to admit
whatsoever.
it. Marcus, he doesn't have to admit
Sorry.
anything that he doesn't want to, my
Well,
brother.
Wait,
of
wait.
course
So
not.
I'm really confused about what we're talking about here. So
Yeah, I don't know
with
how we
respect
got
to
here.
the with
If we-
respect to
if
the
we-
ethical thing,
Yes.
so so first of all, the sort of approach that I was taking, and this is the approach I'd taken in the video that the person mentioned that started out this discussion, was a kind of Hobbesian contractarianism. And then with respect to the science thing, like I think that this is maybe just a matter of like different language, but you could quite easily count constructive empiricism as a kind of fictionalist view of
Not at all.
at least the unobservables. So
No, perhaps.
maybe this is go ahead.
Well, perhaps I meant more the comments you were making at the beginning of this talk, where you covered parts of your understanding of the metaphysics of it, and specifically, you mentioned very briefly. You anecdotally said, in our inquiry of the objective world or the normative world, we observe things in nature, and we paint, as you put it, a picture of nature. This picture painted of nature, I would argue, is fiction in a totality, and all your inquiries of nature themselves are both inwardly and outwardly felt. None of this is addressed by neither Kant nor any of the scientism people. When you make wild claims like this is true, and you appeal to a theory, and after the theory gets challenged, you appeal to a consensus of that theory, that doesn't prove its existence within the very same realm that empiricists appeal to things objectively existing in the first place. For example, if I say...
I mean, I did mention that that you can just deny that there are objective truths across the board.
That's not what I'm doing at all. I'm saying the only way... I'm doing the opposite. I'm saying the only way you get to acknowledge actual objective existence is if you separate yourself from the world as nature and look at the world having... how can I say? Instead of taking the systematic approach to dissecting in a systematic way reality, like you said, carving it down to the tendon of the metaphysical space, perhaps see space itself as a projection of a picture taken by your interaction with it, which is, again, not just systematic, it's both physiognomic and systematic, in the sense that it's both inwardly, intuitively expressed in forms of language, art, poetry, literature, etc., as well as cultural biases, which are born into, subscribed instinctively to, because we are group animals, and die believing so. For example, where Kant would argue it was God, you would argue where it was science, but neither of the arguments make up whether it's Newton's theory or whether it's that of the Bible. Neither of them, factually, as you will, to an objectivist or empiricist, prove that there is even such a thing as universality, let alone infinitesimal space, which exists only in the theoretical form.
Okay.
That's yeah, I don't even know where to start. Yeah, thank you, Kane, so much.
No problem. Cool.
You're welcome to stay as late as you want, but we will be continuing the show, and you feel free to get out whenever you need to, man.
Okay. Well, if that's all, then I can head on out if you want. Yeah.
You're more than welcome to stay as long as you want.
No.
I don't
No.
either.
I
We all
do.
agree.
You're all here right now.
But
Talking.
I do want to say real quick, Kane, that was Thomas's nice way of saying, hey, if you want to hang out, please hang out. But if you want to leave, you can
Yes.
leave. So he wasn't trying to kick you out. But, you know.
No, I'm sorry. I want you to stay as long as you want to stay.
I did kind of want to ask though about what is your take on the sort of fictionalist approach that the Marcus is talking about, right?
I'm going to be honest. I didn't really understand what he was saying or how it related to what I was. I mean, I don't know. I was a bit lost, so I can't really. I don't know if somebody wants to try to summarize it you know, I mean, it might have been that maybe. Look, I'm not really a Kant scholar. I don't know a lot about Kant, so I could have just been, missing some of the relevant background here.
Well, that explains why you're not insufferable. Carry on.
Oh,
Well,
Just kidding.
I could attempt again.
Jeez.
Kate, I could attempt to summarize it a bit more. Again, you gave.
sorry, just before. So, what was it? Just to clarify, like, what is it that you were like objecting to or responding to? What was the position that I had, committed?
Two things
myself
you
to?
said,
had a
right? Well, three things really, but I'll start with the first. Yeah, good idea. We'll start with you said about not necessarily contesting it, but I'll take it a step further in saying that you said prior at the beginning, about an hour ago, that we observe the world as picture. This is an undeniable condition. This picture of the world we have, I would argue, and I think you would probably agree, it's not the actual fucking world. It's a picture of the world, which represents the world as is, but always in a inorganic way, as a world that has already actualized itself, cause and effect, as science systematically dissects reality as in nature.
Sorry, what do you mean when you say the world has actualized? So we represent the world as a world that has actualized itself, did you say?
Marcus.
Hello?
I think my headset cut out. What were you saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
You were saying something about how we represent the world as a world that has actualized itself.
Well, no. So when you see something physically, what you're seeing is a process. For example, light itself is a process which is actively in a process of actualizing itself. What you're seeing in light is a reflection
What do you
of
mean by actualizing itself?
I mean, in the natural world, as in actively, how would I say, in a state of synthesis, natural synthesis, like you are growing or you are dying, like a tree could be growing or a tree could be dying. The essence of the living force within it. Light in that
That's
matter.
a bit vague.
Wait.
Yes,
I don't
know.
Not at all. It's.
Do you mean like, so there's something that is, okay, are we talking like teleologically here? Like there's something that is, developing in a particular direction? And that's
Kane, I think
driven by
Yes.
everything?
I think he's talking
What
about
direction
sort of
is?
Leibniz's vis viva, so to speak. And I think that's kind of what he's highlighting here. The
Correct.
coming to be, that which comes to be.
I
talking
think the
about,
word
like,
direction is
cohesive
crucial
shit?
here, though.
Sure.
Well, direction is very crucial here because direction is intuitively you experience as a human being as well. The human experience is a part of this, and intuitively, this is where you get direction from. This is how we establish fact rather than truth. Truth is something derived from this realm, which we call the empirical realm, material realm, whatever you want to call it. Fact, on the other hand, is something intuitively recognized, something which perhaps once was cognized from an incognizable world, which is cause and effect, and is then physiognomically processed internally and concluded as to be a actual fact, a physiognomic universal fact, like a modus ponens or a modus solens. Light itself, in that sense, when we are seeing it, and just about the majority of all physicists before Newton would actually say this too, light is an active process. We are watching a reflection. We quite literally every color we see are a reflection of light. It's not the color itself that you see. The color itself doesn't actually exist. It's a phenomenon. It's not a noumena. Just like everywhere metaphysically, where there is space, it has been given birth to by time. Just like space gives depth to time comprehensively, metaphysically.
I'm not trying to cut you off, but we
Yeah.
got a lot to chew on here, brother.
Well,
Yeah,
all I'm saying is science is fiction.
I feel like I'm just not the right person to talk to about this, to be honest.
Maybe ask
like,
Travis or ask maybe G can jump in, or somebody that wants to add their 2 cents here.
Well, I mean, I could jump in, but I have a hard time unpacking things too. I'm more of a take it step by step kind of guy, right? So, like, if I could have you condense what you're saying, Marcus, to like say a sentence or two.
Sure.
What would
Earlier
that
when we're talking about the inquiry of the natural world, we spoke briefly. I heard Kane speak about it rather, about microscopes and telescopes. I would say that those are things which give form to things which we observe where elsewhere we would see no form. For example, the moon seems circular, or whatever phase it is in, upon looking at it through microscopes, telescopes, etc., same the other way around, we can observe its form, but only due to relative distance of that object which we have interpreted. Without relative distance, the form wouldn't change. There we see the form of perception is actually dominated and subjugated by nature. So it's an argument for natural reality. It's a sort of metaphysical nature in the sense that it is both nature actualizing itself, having actualized itself, and pre-actualization, which I call, and a few other people in this tradition would call, potentiality or soul. This being said,
we've gone past
sorry.
sentences. No, it's
Yeah.
I know you're passionate. It's all good.
Right.
I don't specifically have a response. That's why I'm asking other people, because it is a call-in show. I'm just asking other people if they, Dow, do you have a response? Barry, anybody that wanted to respond or say anything?
Also, don't be shy, folks, sitting there down there in the listeners section. Call in. We want to hear from you. Let's talk.
Yeah,
Let's
very
get a group conversation going here.
Yeah, come on up. Anybody who wants to
It
talk.
doesn't matter what your level of education or understanding or lexicon is. Everyone is welcome here. So come on, jump into the conversation. Even if you think you have a dumb question, I guarantee you it's not dumb.
Yes, we will find a way to converse.
Thanks, Hakeem.
I have no reason. Kane has already said that he doesn't have any specific.
May I just quickly, Tom, Marcus, is your point that
Yes.
What did you say, that science is dumb or something? Or
No, I didn't say it's dumb. I said it's all fiction, cultural fiction. Like
Science is cringe.
Well, cultural, yeah, but what do you think science is? What do you think its purpose is?
I just told you.
Utility? No,
a fiction, just like all fiction itself serves a function.
Hang on. Do you think science's function is to present a fiction?
No, actually, it's the other way around. Fiction itself is a cultural function of existence. It's a major cultural cope of understanding the world as nature. Every high culture has had this. Every high culture has a philosophy of science. Guess what? Every single one of them predates a philosophy of art, literature, tradition, religion, etc.
Yeah.
These are all like temporary things, and when we appeal to these temporarily outdated, silly physical theoretical maxims from last century,
so Marcus,
it makes me cringe.
My dad used to say this all the time. He used to say, the way you choose to see the world creates the world in which you live. Is that basically what you're saying here? Basically, it's not that we create fictions with science, but that science is itself a fiction through which we view, model, and navigate the world.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is a cultural fiction.
I don't know if fiction is the right way to describe it, right?
Well, it is.
It's kind of like, but it doesn't claim to be like science itself doesn't claim to be infallible, right?
Sure.
Yeah, fiction doesn't give us technology and nuclear power.
And sure, if there's someone using science out there to claim that it's like an infallible process that must be followed or you shall be killed, like this kind of crap. And I'm sure we're going to have really strong moral arguments against this and other things. But, I think most scientists or people that, that work in the field are going to tell you that, it makes mistakes. It gives us the best, models we have based on the evidence available, just going through the process. But if there's another process, we're open to that too. So feel free to present.
Hey, Trav.
Actually, I'm not talking about the methodology of it. Yeah.
I was just going to add real quick. Yeah, I mean, whenever you take intro to philosophy of science in school, basically one of the first things you learn is there is no scientific method, right? It's scientific methods. Right, and every different domain is going to apply it differently. So I
agree.
That's right.
I would go further again and say that no, it is very much not necessarily the methodologies which we apply, because those differ on what type of sciences we are talking about. I'm talking science as a whole, like religion is fiction, and you can get angry if you want to disagree.
No. But when you say fiction, it's like, yes, we made it up. The philosophy of science is made up. It's born of
it's not made up. Hold on, it's not made up. It's not made up. It's just as not made up as the fact that you're looking at your nose right now when you look in front of you, yet your brain is quote unquote made up that it's not there, right? That's made up in the sense that your brain makes.
I totally see what Marcus is saying, but it's really kind of difficult whenever we use words like fiction, because that means, Harry Potter to us. It's like,
Well,
no,
Harry
no,
Potter
no,
is part
guys,
of our culture.
the same thing that made Harry Potter is in fact the same thing that makes and conducts science.
It's what metaphysically makes everything.
I agree.
How else do things
I
become?
agree with that. But is everything born of the subject a fiction? Is that a good way to describe it? I think that's kind of what we're talking about. It's more
I would say
semantical.
no. Well, there is a thing called destiny, of course, and I am not disputing destiny. Causality tries to dispute destiny, not directly, but a lot of. This is hence the reason why I said Kane's interpretation of metaphysics was a bit Kantian, in the sense that he subscribes to this unifinitesimal sort of equalizer, which is right or wrong, or good or bad, or space or no space, or emptiness, or planets, whatever it might be. These are theoretical physics, just like, I don't know, Euclidean metaphysics would argue something entirely different with monads.
And what does fiction mean, Marcus?
Well, the fictionalism currently, and I don't know if Kane, you're familiar with this, universities here in Europe, they teach it, but not really the way I would like it to be taught, and there's a lot of people that have confusion on it. Basically, you have things like epistemological fiction, modal fiction, and metaphysical fiction. I am of the belief, personally, that fictionalism is something both metaphysical and epistemological, in the sense that we intuitively cannot actually choose to subscribe or not to subscribe to certain fiction, to the point where you can see too with neuroscience and psychology, etc. The reason why we have been more and more progressively effective ever since Frankfurt and ever since Hegel is because we actually started studying the inward or physiognomic aspects of the brain, i.e. psychology, psychiatry, behavioral science, etc.
Yeah, Kant had a word for this. He called it heteronomy, and Hume called it common sense. Right, but
they weren't really keying in on exactly precisely what it is you're talking about. That's you're right. It actually kind of ties back into what we were talking about earlier with the difference between logic, reasoning in terms of a system, and simple basic reasoning. Right, like your brain latches on to these reliable models of the world, so to speak.
Yeah,
is that kind of what you're talking?
If you're saying something's false or fiction, I would ask you by what standard, and if you're to say because it consists things that have not fully been described or defined, then I don't think anyone's going to disagree with you. But
that's
I don't
not what I'm
think
saying.
most people are using that as a metric.
Yes, I'm not making an appeal to normies, as I put it. I'm not making a normative claim. What I am saying is my personal metaphysics.
Claim, right?
Of course, yeah, a descriptive claim of my own description, which is that neither Kane nor anyone, it seems, out of the thousands of papers I've been reading through, has an answer in their metaphysics or epistemology for fictionalism. And I don't think it's Kane personally. I think it's actually academia, and it's very much a lack of covering the epistemology as well as the metaphysics of fictionalism. It's intuitive, it's biological, it's genetic. We have proven this by natural science. So why the hesitancy?
I would be careful about saying we have proven this by natural science. We would need some evidence and some journals and stuff.
We should get Thomas. We should get Hakeem.
I shouldn't have said we.
We should get Hakeem in here. He's been waiting. Huh?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see. Yeah. All right, Marcus. If you need to, bud, hop back in the caller queue. Let's get Hakeem.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks for having me, man. And good to talk to you, Kane.
See you later.
Scary help.
There we go, Hakeem.
Good evening.
What questions do you have?
Welcome back, man.
Hey guys.
What is philosophically crack-a-lackin'?
Well, first of all, I just sometimes wonder because I hear the word metaphysics being used around. Hold on a second. Hey, Philly.
Hey, brother.
Oh, he's at the
Let's
club.
try to.
LOL.
Yeah. Let's try to get somewhere a little bit easier to hear you.
And talk philosophy for 10 minutes.
Hey, Phil, you got that cocaine you owe me?
This fucking place ain't vibing. I'm going to go talk Aristotle.
We should actually pump some hardcore EDM in here when we're in here late at night.
Sure,
Do you
man.
think that would attract more people?
Sure. It would attract me, that's for sure.
We'll just have a music channel where we just play EDM all night.
And say nothing.
We can do it.
Just stare into the camera.
Yeah, just stare at the camera and listen.
Oh, he
to
just
EDM.
took off. Oh, there he goes. He's come back.
He's come back.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Holy crap!
What happened?
So
Is Phil okay?
That sounded evil.
it was Billy. He's the owner of the club. He just came out. He was looking around like he couldn't find me,
Dude,
and I
you're
was just
hardcore. You
across
call
the.
in when you're at the club. I love that.
It's so
I
dope.
love that. You're the new king of
Anyway,
Bangburn.
so that's funny. So metaphysics, right? I mean, I'm so basic in the definitions that I just look at the word meta, right, above and beyond the physical, right? Is that how we define it, or what are you guys like?
If I may, real quick, metaphysics what is there and what is it like? It defines fundamental natures of realities, connections between things. I mean, things like necessity and contingency, necessary and sufficient conditions, possibility and impossibility. There's a huge metaphysics is a huge overarching branch of philosophy. So, all roads eventually lead back to metaphysics in some way.
Sure.
Yeah, the actual etymology of the term came from Aristotle had written a bunch of works on physics, and then he had a bunch of like miscellaneous stuff that was collected after the works on physics, and so meta was the Latin for after, or Greek for after, or something, and so it became like metaphysics for after physics. That's it. That's where the term comes from.
Metaphysica.
They have changed it today to mean above or
beyond.
Beyond, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I would take this. Oh, go on.
Yeah, no, that's how I approach it because I'm relatively new to metaphysics. I mean, the first time I really heard the term was in like 2008, and I remember specifically because there was a school called the University of Metaphysical Sciences that was offering different programs that it seemed really more like comparative religion. It's based off of a church called Wisdom of the Heart Church, and really it was just like a lot of different articles and courses put together to help you to understand what different people in the world believe in their philosophies and religion, and and it covers everything.
Yeah, I mean that's not the approach to metaphysics that I would take. I mean, like I wouldn't call that really metaphysics, right?
Right.
So basically, you can think of it like this, and there's a big problem in philosophy even still today. There's a big debate between, well, what comes first, metaphysics or epistemology, right? Like, how do we even conduct ourselves
metaphysics
in a metaphysical
or logic,
manner?
really?
Right. So I would say philosophy is metaphysics. That's what I would assert. And metaphysics not only comes first, but connects to everything. So basically, if you were to cut your analysis of reality all the way down to its base and sort of pull a Descartes, right, and do a first philosophy, well, basically, metaphysics is going to be that category, those categories of apprehension that you apprehend reality through, right?
Okay.
Let's involve our guest, gentlemen.
Like I would agree with that because like I believe it is foundational. Like metaphysics really is like a place to start. Like, for example, the ideas between materialism and idealism, right? So induction versus deduction. So starting with the idea first, or the thought, and then everything comes from there. But now, when you guys talk about like fiction and things like that, it for some reason the word unreal or not reality comes to mind when I hear the word fiction, that science is a fiction. And because a lot of people are throwing around these terms, like they say the physical world is not real, especially people who are supposedly spiritual or like new age people, right? Because that's the kind of circles I run around in, and they're always like, that's not real, the physical world is not real and all this. I'm like, well, why are we saying this? Because if you're experiencing it, it's real. It may be an illusion, right? Like
you need to put your skepticism hat on, my friend.
This turns back to Keynes' critique of my philosophy earlier, right? So basically, if you are experiencing these things, right, there's going to be some dimension along which it's real, right? Even if it's like a unicorn or some shit, right?
Yes, yeah, sure.
But it's finding out what's real. As far as what Marcus was talking about, you think of it less in terms of ontology, less in terms of fiction as being or not being, and
Yeah.
fiction as metaphysics, like what actually is fiction and how is it basically applied from the human mind from the most like rudimentary and primitive position. That's going to be your
Yes.
metaphysical approach at this.
Hmm.
Does that make sense, guys? Or did I just babble on?
No, that makes sense to me. I just really wonder how to get to the bottom of, you know, a starting point. Like where, like how would I start to approach metaphysics from a way that's more useful? Because I'm always looking to try to get something done, and what I mean by that is I need to figure things out for myself because a lot of things are confusing. You know, I grew up with, you know, typical thing, you know, this kind of religious abuse where, you know, God, the devil, and all that stuff like that, and
Mm-hmm.
and thinking that, you know, if I sin, I'm gonna burn in hell, and right, wrong, and all this invisible shit.
Well,
And
let
I,
just
yeah,
I was just gonna tell you my advice, and I'm sure everybody has a different opinion on here, but I would say that go to the Wikipedia pages, go to the Stanford of Encyclopedia of Philosophy pages, and read about logic and epistemology, read about metaphysics, read about ethics, read about ontology, read about all these things, and piece them together and see how we got from philosophy to mathematics and science. You know what I mean? So if you kind of dig into this stuff, and you don't have to be a PhD or anything, all you got to do is just go read some general stuff about logic, epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics, and you'll have a very steady handle on speaking to people about metaphysics, or reasoning yourself into better positions with epistemology and JTB and stuff like that. I don't want
yeah.
to get too far off on a
No,
tangent.
I get that. So now here's something very interesting. So my understanding of philosophy is super basic. I thank you for, you know, reminding me that there are resources like that that I can look
Oh
into.
yeah, oh yeah.
I
Thank you.
had a conversation with a NASA scientist last night for about an hour. It's recorded, and some people are astounded, and I don't really find that to be very special, but by my understanding of physics. Like, I mean, this guy works for NASA. He's an applied physicist. He, you know, works on these programs with them, and so we're having a
Sure.
conversation, and we're on par with each other. And he completely, as a scientist, he's completely opposed to most things that are metaphysical and philosophical. His thing is just the applied physics as far as it goes to engineering and getting rockets into space. So we're having a conversation all this whole time about building bases on the moon and stopping backward contamination from bacterium from Mars, and all this stuff is because it's easy for me to read and understand. But then when you start getting to stuff like epistemology and the metaphysics, and I would like to try to talk to him about that, a lot of the scientists that I talk to and medical doctors, not all of them, but they can offer me nothing in an understanding besides the stuff that they're tooling around with. And then even then, you
I
know, I
mean,
have a
dude, if
better
you're
understanding.
understanding classical mechanics and like the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, then you should have no problems with doing an overview in logic and epistemology. I think you'll find it quite easy
Well,
compared to
we
those kind of
actually had
things.
that. We actually had that conversation and about the Copenhagen interpretation of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and how,
Okay.
you know, that's very flawed in some ways because of, you know, anytime you interact with anything, you know, you're going to have a change. It's not, people try to put this
Sure.
thing on it like it's the observer, like your thoughts, your eyeballs doing it, but it's just really, that's actually such a classical thing that you can't measure the position with great
Hmm.
accuracy without diminishing the velocity, and vice
Dude,
versa.
I would love
And
to
so,
talk physics all day, but I want to steer it back towards philosophy
yes,
because of our guest,
sure.
and
So
we
my
want to
point
be,
was,
yeah.
yeah. So my point was that I could talk all day with people like that, and I've talked to physicians and so on and so forth, and I have this knowledge in that area. But when it comes to metaphysics, none of these people I talk to, it seems like like you guys, we could talk physics and stuff all day long, and you can talk to me about metaphysics and
Oh, I
other
love
things in
it.
philosophy. But how is it that most of these people that I talk about that have this insane knowledge, like they're NASA scientists, right? And they're doing this stuff that's supposed to be the pinnacle of our society and reaching out for exploration and adventure, but they have no underpinning and sometimes even refuse, even though this gentleman was very nice. His name is Christopher Birkenbein.
Okay.
But like, they just don't have, they either refuse to or don't have any foundation in like philosophy or anything whatsoever besides maybe
You'll
one
find that
class
a
they took
lot
in
in the
university.
science field. Hakeem, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were done.
No, you're fine.
You'll find
I'm good.
you'll find that a lot in the science fields, to where they don't understand their underpinnings of their foundations of philosophy, as well as they understand, their philosophy of science and their methodologies. So I'm with you on that. Did you have anything to
Yeah. So last thing I'll ask is as far as it goes there, do you find it then also that more people who tend to philosophy, maybe you guys, seem to be more open-minded also to understanding physics and science? Because from my perspective, it seems like that. It seems like people who are into metaphysics and philosophy tend to be more open-minded to science. Or am
I
I
want to
just,
learn
is that just
everything
me?
I can. I want to learn all the true things I can cram into my skull. So
Me too. All right,
anything.
that's it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you guys. Appreciate you.
Hakeem, you're always welcome, brother. You're always very kind. I appreciate you.
Later. I'll be listening at the door here. All the drunken people move in and out.
That's all right. That's okay.
Actually, can we talk about that for a little bit? Kane, I want to get your opinion on that question he just asked about the absence, it would seem, of philosophical training of any kind, it would appear, on behalf of the scientific domains, the upper echelons of academia. Have you noticed that
Some
very
of
same
them
thing?
do, some of them don't. You know what I'm saying? Like I've read scientists who know their philosophy
Oh,
and
I mean, I know they're there, but I mean, I have experienced the drought, and I'm wondering if Kane had, because I know you're in the upper echelons of
Yeah,
academia.
well, I mean, not really. I'm not really in academia at all these days.
Right,
I'm
right.
done now, but I've got my PhD, and I'm
Congrats, man.
the job market is not really good enough for me to get anywhere else with it. So, I mean, I can say that my own experience was that the university I went to, which is the University of Exeter, it was highly interdisciplinary, and so you had a lot of philosophers working with biologists. In fact, they have this organization there called Aegenis, which was like specifically a group of biologists, philosophers, sociologists working on topics at the intersection of those disciplines. So it does happen, but I think that actually the explanation for this is just the extreme specialization that has occurred in academia over the last century or so.
I
Right?
totally
Like, so
agree.
it just used to be the case that you could be somebody who was interested in researching the world, and you could pretty much like look at all sorts of different topics. You could do physics one day, and
Da
then you could
Vinci.
think about philosophy, and yeah, I mean, and over time though, I think that these fields have become. I mean, it's just because as each field has developed, it becomes more and more and more difficult to like develop the relevant background knowledge
Mm-hmm.
to even enter that field.
Mm-hmm.
So like now, I mean, it's like how would a modern physicist even have time to learn philosophy?
Yeah, it's so specialized. Yeah, I mean, like before, you're totally right. Like before Da Vinci and the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, when these things became separated from philosophy, people who were doing science or math or whatever, they were considered natural philosophers. You know what I
Yep,
mean?
Right.
one of our biggest
I mean, remember
mistakes.
that like
Yeah.
Isaac Newton was he was like a physicist in his spare time. Like
Right.
Yeah,
most
he
of the
was an
time he did
alchemist in
alchemy,
his.
and
Yeah, he was
and then
also
he was like
regarded as
working
the
for the
last
Royal
of the
Mint.
Magi, right?
Like,
Yeah, he thought the Catholic Church was the Antichrist. Newton was full of it. I love
Him and
Newton.
Leibniz, man, they were just the best, honestly.
They're funny, but Newton gave us so much good shit.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, the thing about it though is like, I think basically the power of complex adaptive system science and systemism as a broadly applied philosophical model is catching on in the sciences, right? And you are
Systems
seeing,
philosophy.
oh yes,
Yeah.
Now you are seeing this stuff applied in neuroscience specifically, in a few other domains, biology. I'm even starting to see signs at my wife's university for like interdisciplinary studies, in the sense that like basically people come and they get a degree in integration of numerous classes of all different types, right? So this idea is catching on. But I mean, to Hakeem's point, I would say, yeah. I mean, think about, and you guys know me. I've brought this up a whole bunch. Think about your primary school education, right? Was there ever any education in philosophy? Ever any introduction course
No.
to logic,
It's
ethics,
lacking.
metaphysics, any of this?
It's lacking, bro.
The
It's
reason, yeah, and it's not just lacking; it's that it's unforgivably lacking, and it's unforgivably lacking because they're doing it on purpose. There's no way that you can convince me that the fact that out of philosophy and the history of philosophy comes all of these different domains of exploration and inquiry, and yet somehow, for some reason, they didn't make it to the primary school curricula. How'd that happen, right?
G, can I add to that? You think that?
Hang on 1 second. Let Kane respond, and then we'll get you in, Nivik.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Kane? Because like, I think it's horrible.
I actually did have some exposure to philosophy quite young in school, but I was probably quite unusual in that.
Very.
So no, it's not a common thing. I mean, I don't know. I tend to think that like my assumption is, and I haven't really done any research at all into the history of the education system, but my assumption is that the goal is to create people who can be economically productive. And there isn't really much in philosophy. Like philosophy doesn't really do that. Philosophy is maybe, if it's going to do anything in that respect, it might sort of challenge the assumptions that lead us to think that that's a worthwhile thing to do. That's the kind of thing philosophers do, right? So but then I don't know, because I think that there are certain issues, in say the sciences, where it actually can be quite helpful to have an understanding of some of these philosophical problems.
Yes.
I mean, I know that there's like a common view that like, stuff like the problem of induction and things like that, those are just like abstract philosophical issues.
Or the problem of deduction,
they're interesting to learn,
I learned from you.
Yeah, they're like abstract philosophical issues. We learn about them, and then we just move on. And I actually think that's not quite right. I think that some of those philosophical problems, including the problem of induction, are actually like genuine practical problems.
Yes, they are.
Sometimes there are those questions that pop up that kind of have a trend of being labeled, put into the category of those are problems for philosophers. They're not actually problems for us out here conducting science, building aeroplanes and this sort of thing. We don't have a problem. It's a problem for philosophy. A lot of that gets grouped in, I think, into a similar category.
Can we let Nivik respond to you real quick, just to be cordial to my friend Nivik here, G?
Yes.
Go ahead, Nivik.
No, I wasn't going on about anything. I was just going on to this point about being.
Cut out on us, brother.
You cut out on us, brother. Kane, he's working as a security guard, and he loses connection sometimes.
I see.
When he's got to go kick ass, right?
When he's got to go kick ass and take names. Nivik, can you hear us, brother?
Yeah, I was just going to G point that it challenges people's biases and in making sense of reality, and it might be deliberate. Okay, that's all.
Well, yeah, I mean, do you guys remember being in primary school and thinking, why am I learning this? right? How
Yeah,
many of
because
us
you're a
actually have
child.
that? Well, kind of. Well, see, that's one of those little fictions that we tell ourselves
So I
that
don't
are
think
a
like
problem.
children should be taught Nietzsche, but I mean you should probably be teaching, high schoolers and middle schoolers like the basics of philosophy,
Bro, I think
maybe
Nietzsche is
the
one of those
basics of
guys
psychology as well.
Nietzsche's one of those philosophers you should come to later. Like get some Heraclitus and some Lucretius and some
Yeah,
Plato and
yeah.
get some of those guys first and then come to Nietzsche later.
There are
But
definitely optimist philosophers that would be great for children to know about.
well, see, here's the reason why I bring that up is because I think that useful. I don't know who it's useful to, but that useful fiction that we tell ourselves, oh, they're kids, they just do that. It's like no. We've actually studied kids. Okay, they love to explore. They love to learn. It's one of the key indicators that a kid is actually happy in life.
I would
No
say
shit.
parents are your big parents are
Well,
going to be
that's
your big
true.
block. Yeah.
That's true, but like I also bring it up in the sense that it wasn't until that I actually made contact with philosophy and started applying it to all these different domains that I realized why it was I was learning those things
Yeah.
10, 15 years ago. And
Yeah.
that's the moment I thought, oh, I actually love this.
Philosophy opens doorways that you didn't think were connected. You know what I mean? It's a beautiful thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get a dopamine kick on learning stuff, especially useful
yeah,
information, right?
absolutely.
In like a
Absolutely, you
progressive
do.
kind of way. So like if we're young and we're not being told what it is that we're learning, why we're learning it, in a philosophical sense, in the sense that, well, math works because of logic, right? You never learn that shit in high school and in primary school. You don't learn that. You spend most of your time thinking, well, why am I even learning this like trig shit that I'm never going to use?
I think my highest AP course that I took was like Intro to Calculus, so they definitely weren't doing any philosophy 101s or anything like that.
Yeah, but here, check it out. It's like my wife she's about to graduate next month, magna cum in bio. They teach her calculus-based physics, and it's specifically, believe it or not, it's specifically mathematics that's being used to right now with the application of assembly theory predict mutagenic pathways successfully. This is absolute groundbreaking shit, and it's like, guess what? A mathematical thing. It's like, well, we're not exposed to that sort of thing. So anyway, that's my take on it. I think Hakeem really brought up something hardcore.
Okay. All right. We still have our guest, and I want to hear what he thinks as well. But real quick, Perry.
I do. I probably have to leave actually in a minute.
Okay.
So,
Well,
yeah,
everyone,
I'll,
say your. Yeah. No. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm ecstatic to talk to you. Everybody, say their goodbyes.
Cool.
Au revoir.
Thanks a
See
lot.
you later,
Ken.
everybody.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, brother. See you later. Come back
Bye-bye.
anytime.
Thanks.
Sure.
Ken.
Just let me know.
Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen,
Gently, ladyman.
gentle ladymen, however you want to do that. Make sure, Kane, all you got to do is, I think it's leave room at the bottom right, or does anybody know where the leave room option is?
I think
I
he
don't-
did leave. I think it's just hanging.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right then, Scott, you're back. We didn't hear from you there for a little while playing chess and shit. Don't lie.
Oh no, I was actually just soaking it in the whole time, man.
Oh yeah, I was loving it. I was absolutely loving it. G, I'm
I'll
so
give you
happy to
something,
see you,
so-
bro.
Yeah, of course, man. I heard about this little shindig, and Kane's one of those guys that actually gets a rather prestigious name on it. And so I thought, well, I'll jump in here and see if we can't chat with him.
Kane has been a favorite of mine for many years, and I didn't even realize that I was getting to talk to him until like 4 days ago. I was like, oh shit, I've seen shitloads of his videos. So
yeah, bro. Where's Tart
kinda-
Vader? He loves Kane.
Yeah, I don't know. Tart's been in and out. But I was gonna ask him a lot of questions, but then me and Perry just kind of wanted to know his take on logic, logic being normative and things like that. And if you watch the video, you pretty much get the entire gist of what he's going on about. I implore anybody in the speakers listening, please go to Kane B's philosophy YouTube channel and watch his logic series and watch his epistemology series. They are wonderful, and they will help you understand a lot of things. He has a lot of other, like the philosophy of science. He's got like 40 something videos on the philosophy of science. I've been going through that, and it's absolutely great. So definitely a plug for him. We will be getting into a lot of the topics that he talks about on my show eventually. So he will be research material for me. But yeah, I'm gonna open it back up to callers here in just a second. But Perry, did you want to say something?
No, just like Scott, I'm kind of just soaking it all in.
Yeah.
I don't know much about the world being absolute fiction. I mean, I think I kind of understand where Marcus is coming from, and I share.
Well, I just now saw him in the callers, so you can. I have no dog in this fight. I don't know shit about the positions that he argues from, so I don't want to speak out of ignorance.
Again, think of it less
but
as an ontological thing. Okay.
Hang on. I'm going to add Marcus in here, and y'all can talk to him about it. Okay.
Sounds good.
Hey, you guys can hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you kind of
Real
mean
good.
like it's metaphorical, like it's useful metaphor when you say this kind of stuff is fiction?
No.
Perhaps?
No. I mean, so I don't know if you guys have been following the chat here, but I feel like Lady's sort of on the same page I am, perhaps closest out of all of you, in the sense that two things, perhaps three things are being referenced here when I talk about fictionalism. Modal fictionalism, which is purely episteme, as well as metaphysical fictionism, and perhaps other forms of fictionism too. Like I said, this is a field very much in development in academia currently. What I am saying is that how else do things become other than we make them up, right? Because let's be honest, can any one of you show me any atom, any particle, any part of infinitesimal space that is actually good, or that is actually bad, or that actually has any of these other things? What very much the issue is that Kant started, I think unknowingly at the time, is that we now have a tradition of scientific, academic, postdoctorate masters systematically approaching the question of the human experience and its morals, which is precisely what Nietzsche was speaking of in Gay Science. How we have culturally degraded our academia to a part where the whole study of physiognomic is no longer really actualized as real science, as people put it, as the real world, as the world as nature. By that sense, I mean, Comte is the most living proof of this, and the invention of sociology, and the idea that sociology somehow is entirely separate of methodology of natural sciences themselves.
Hey, don't
Hence,
forget Heidegger too.
Yeah, Heidegger was one of the main proponents of this.
Yeah.
Heidegger is one of the most scummy people that's led to this, I believe, because
I hate the guy.
He knew exactly what I was talking about. I think deep down he knew exactly what I am talking about right now. He knew about fictionism. He read Spengler. He read Fichte. He read Goethe. He read Leibniz, all in German. He understood very well what he was talking about. He just decided not to address it instead. And I know why, too, because he was a Nazi. We can talk about this. We can talk about the materialistic implications of being a Nazi, how race is and has to be something materialistically, objectively dissectable and calculatable. Otherwise, how else are you going to explain the Holocaust? How else are you going to explain invading Poland? How else are you going to really explain enforcing your will upon any other peoples or folks or cultures, etc.? The answer is you cannot. So he was politically incentivized to be a bitch and look away. I don't blame him. He was a pussy. People I do blame are the modern day Kantians, who have all systemized and categorized reality to such a sheer existence of what it is that things like art and literature are not even part of the picture. People that make claims to merely and purely theoretical, scientific quote-unquote theories, which nothing distinguishes them from being scientific other than the fact that it has a few signatures of people who were most likely bribed behind the paper that hold a PhD. Congratulations. No one gives a fuck. What I care about is what I care about is what's real and what isn't real. And real in the sense, not in the inwardly felt or outwardly felt, because this, of course, we can all subjectively establish. We know our feelings are real. We know our thoughts are real. We know we think, therefore we are. So I can most likely assume that you are real.
I can assert it. I know you're real.
Right, yeah, me too. Because I know what is fictional and what is not. And we can see where it becomes a giant issue metaphysically when we just skip that over, right? Like Thomas was doing, and I love the show, Thomas. Do not get me wrong, but you skipped over fictionalism, which I notice not just you do. 99% of all academics I meet do, and it's because it is
I
not
don't know
covered in
what
the curriculum.
fictionalism is. That's why I said I didn't want to
Exactly.
speak on it.
Of course, that's the issue, is what I'm saying.
I
Fictionalism
think
is
it's
the
intellectually honest of me not to speak on it. So
correct. Correct. Intellectually, it is honest. As for you as a human being, it is simply ignorant. We all subscribe to fictions. We all believe in
I
things that
mean,
we know
that's
deep
true.
down not to be true.
I am ignorant of the philosophy of science concerning fictionalism. I do not deny that.
Well, I can
That's not
actually
what I'm
attest
talking
to what
about.
Marcus is saying. I mean, like, it doesn't actually come up in philosophy of science, right?
Yes,
I don't like it. You'll read about perspectivalism before you'll ever read about fictionalism,
correct.
and
Mhm.
I don't really know what that is about, but there really is something to there's at least enough there to explore and maybe search for some structural synthesis between, like, your current standing view of the world and what fictionalism is stating at the bottom, right? Especially if you're already kind of a skeptic. It really should blend right in with what you already feel, how you
Not
already
just
approach
that. If what you're going for that G is going for here, which is peak realism, then
Oh
it's a
yeah.
criteria. I would argue it would be just like when Kane earlier said the world is kind of like an image, but then didn't address that because it is an image, it is not actually the real world. It is merely an image derived from the real world. That's why I disagree. That's why I would contest and say, well, everything you consider to be objective is nothing but mere subjectivity. And everything which Hegel's dialectic covered, you are speaking of. And
Yeah, but
everything which
how do
Nietzsche
you?
covered in the gay science is pretty much what
Is
is
shit
being
is shit
demonstrated.
real or not real? I don't get what we're talking
Hold on,
Yeah,
about.
hold
yeah.
on.
I was actually gonna ask about that,
It's
Nivik.
it's like
Hold
it's like
on, hold on. You
both
guys are
inside your
missing.
mouth.
I think you guys are missing the point that Kane was going down. It's not that he's saying is the world like a picture. He's saying the way that a human being, the way that we can understand it, this is what it is. He's not saying in the actual real world it's just a picture, right?
Okay, Scott,
He's
it,
just talking about
are you the world?
the way
Have
that
you lived the life of a dog? Do you know what the eyes of a dog see? Do you know what my eyes see? Do you know what I feel like when I'm mad?
you're missing the point, though, man.
I
Like
don't think I am at all. I
So we
think
can't
you are
communicate then.
missing the point.
Well, how
So
about
we
this?
can't so we can't communicate. We can't share
It's
this
not.
knowledge.
Hold on. It's not about not being able to communicate. It's about being able to receive what I'm proposing
Well,
forward.
we're telling
This
each
what
other
I'm.
what's in our
Nivik, hold
heads
on.
right now.
This
This
what
is
I'm
about me
highlighting.
for Tom, and Nivik hasn't spoken too much, so he does need to get a little
Right.
floor time here in a second. But go ahead and finish up your point, Marcus. Go ahead, bud.
Right. Thank you. What I am saying, and that is, it is biologically programmed and genetically programmed and intuitively expressed to subscribe to fiction. It is part of what keeps us alive. The only true universality that neither Kant really nor any of the other cringe lord, quote unquote, categorized systemist of philosophy address is struggle. That's really the only thing that
So what's
makes
reality?
things. Nivik, hold on. The only thing that makes
Just
us, well, the only thing that makes us equal, as you will, is struggle. That being said, we subscribe to fiction in a biological sense, intuitively, as well as culturally. We decide to subscribe to certain fiction. We
Actually,
become of certain beliefs.
I actually like that, the whole, like, what
Man,
makes
like,
us equal thing. Basically, that's like a kind of a small reiteration of the Hegelian negation, right? So basically, you come in contact with reality. It presents itself as, let's say, something to be overcome, but can only be overcome through the negation of the aspects of your being which cannot overcome them.
Through
Right.
will of power, in any
Right.
chain sense. Yep.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So not a bad. That's not a bad point at all. Especially whenever you think about, like, it actually is our modalities of thought, right? Our systemized, you might call it, modality, our framework, right? Our schema, as Kant will call it, that we actually engage the world by, right?
Yep.
It's not like you're just flying around just doing, nothing, right? That you haven't coordinated internally to have happen, and all of that coordination is happening in terms of a world model of some kind, some
I
sort
would
of
go
scheme.
further. Gee, I would go even further and to say that in the only experimental craft of sociology, which is applied psychology, which all of it, of course, is fiction like the rest of science, what we can see here is the only universal agreement between psychologists, philosophers, behavioral scientists, and biologists is that at the bottom of every pyramid of human needs is precisely the basic needs of safety, security, etc., etc.
Sure.
These are all things that play directly into the Nietzschean sense of will
Would
to
you
power.
call that a fiction, though?
Hold on.
No, I would call. Hold on,
Wait,
Scott. If you could not.
There has to be, please, for the love of God, there has to be a point of clarification on what the fuck you mean by fiction. Right. I mean, like, do you know there is like a standard definition of what fiction is, and the way you're using it does not mean.
I referenced a few. You're not familiar with it.
So real quick, Scott. Real quick. I have read about fictionalism now, at least a brief overview of it, and I do not agree with it. But I understand what you mean when you say it. It doesn't mean that I don't think that it could be some kind of cultural fiction that, you know, is like how Jordan Peterson says metaphorical substrate. I'm not completely throwing the idea. I'm not completely throwing the idea out. But Scott is right. When you talk about fiction and then juxtapose that with the word science, it does not usually denote good ideas in most people's brains.
Well, see, I'm not appealing to the goodness of his brain, though. And another thing is, there isn't one type of fictionalism, right? What I'm merely speaking is that, whether you like to admit it or not, Scott, if you took the best metaphysicists that we have today, and if you could step in a time travel machine and go back to, I don't know, the time of Euclidean metaphysics, that person would be deemed utterly fucking insane by the city of Athens. Just like if you were to inverse it, same thing would happen, right? They would argue that anyone that considers to be, if you were to explain to someone of the Hellenic League that you are part of an infinitesimal logos, where in between every monad there's this thing called space, which is truly the equalizer.
This is a lot of old philosophy, though. That a lot.
No, this is the very thing you guys were talking about earlier when you were talking about aliens, when you were talking about this universe. You guys are all Kantians without being aware of it. That's how deep the indoctrination goes.
Hang on, G, 1 second.
It's scary. It's very scary.
You just got to like take a step back, like make your claim.
I did, man, but I don't think you want to hear
it. Dude, you've been talking for like 5 minutes straight.
Look, he's Danish, okay?
We're all friends here, but the idea is that
I just want
science can't just be. Does science predict the future for us and allow us for technology and all that shit?
No, I told you what science is. Science, regardless of our culture or others, is a cultural coping mechanism of figuring the fuck out what the outside world is. It's a method.
But stop real quick. Let me stop you. But does it not actually work? To do
work
that,
in what sense?
Right?
Work in what sense? To what value?
Help us survive.
Can I apply science and cope my ass to a light bulb?
It would be easier to smoke literal copium than to do any of that. Because ultimately you're asking me the same thing. Will I get high if I smoke heroin? Yes, you will get high if you smoke heroin. Does that now mean you know the answers to the universe? No, just as much as the idiot Greek from 2,000 years ago didn't either.
Marcus, but then it just gets down to you just saying my copium's better than your copium.
Not at all. Not at all. That's what you're assuming.
How is it not? If you're saying
I'm not selling you no copium. What I'm saying is look at reality. Right? Did we have art? Did we have literature? Did we have all language before we had science? Yes. Did we have religion before we had science? Yes. Did other cultures have the same thing? Yes. Did other cultures, their religiosity, shape the fundamental metaphysical concepts which later expressed themselves in science? Yeah, they did. It's almost like science itself is just a cultural fiction.
I got a perfect question to piggyback on. I got a perfect question to piggyback on that. What is it that
Marcus talk, man?
What is it that you think, Marcus, that true? Like, let's say we all agreed that statement that you just made was true about the cultural emergence of these things. What is it that you think that conveys in terms of a metaphysical understanding that is indispensable?
Right. So what we have to do then is understand our preset positions metaphysically. Henceforth, I try to confront Cain about what he was saying, although I don't think any of you were aware of what I was addressing. I was addressing the concept of the metaphysical concept of relativity, of infinitesimal space, of Newtonian physics. All these things are fictional presuppositions of Western culture, just as much as that of Plotinus or that of Plato or that of any of the other classics would be to the Hellenes or any of the Egyptians to the
Everything just
Okay,
goes
okay.
back to your your then view
Even
of
if that
Western
is true,
culture.
even if that
well.
real quick, Nevik, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Even if that were true, it still works for us, doesn't it? Science does. I mean, do you dislike
Well,
science? Is that like where we're going
but
for
Yeah,
here?
are
Thomas,
you a science denier, bro?
hold on, Thomas. You conceded to it beautifully there. You said that still works for us, and yes, it does. It works precisely just for us. That's what it
I
is.
was
It's a
conceding for
fiction.
the sake
One
of
we
argument that it
created it,
still
right?
works. I
Okay,
was
Well,
just
to us it
conceding for the
does.
sake of
To
argument
us it
that it
does.
still
again,
definitely
To
works.
us it does, like you said.
dude,
Yeah.
Helps us survive, all these things.
To us it
Just
does. Yes,
real
to us
quick,
it does.
Marcus, just real quick. When you said it's a fiction, that's what I said. Like, so now you're not saying fictionalism. So now you're not talking about this thing. Now you're saying it's a fiction. Please, dear God, describe to me, give me a definition of what you're using for fiction, because
I just
all
have
this.
been. Have
No,
you
you
been
have
listening to
not.
what I've been saying?
Hold on. Just give me a definition. When you say it's a
I just
fiction,
did.
how
Okay,
about you
well, hold
do
on.
it again then? Just like for fucking.
Here. I got you back, Scott. Okay. The idea that statements that appear to be descriptions of the world should not be construed as such, but should instead be understood as cases of make believe or pretending to treat something as
Yep,
literally true when it is not.
that's
Yes.
the definition I read too. Yep.
Not literally true, but objectively true.
Right.
See, here's the difference. I wouldn't say literally true because I wouldn't argue that your experience of the world is not your experience of the
Well,
world.
dude,
What I would argue is,
do you
yeah,
remember that discussion between Sam Harris and JBP where it was basically their first discussion ever and it got, millions of views because basically what Jordan Peterson was talking about was truth was true because it was true enough, right? So it's like if I have a world model, right, and I have a schema that is actually useful in the sense that it aligns with the logos just enough that I can actually achieve my stated goals, my pursued goals, then
right.
it is true enough, even if the content of the actual schema itself is nothing more than a symbolic representation.
That's the Hegelian argument. I would say that completely negates my underlying metaphysical position that there is such a thing as a objective morality.
Hegel's a myth, bro.
Well,
German
you just proved
idealism.
it.
German idealism is cool to consider, but we have moved far past that in the world. German idealism is
Not at all. Not at all. All I've heard tonight is straight up Anglo analytic German influence idealism. It really is. Like if Nietzsche could be raised from the grave and he would hear this shit, he'd probably laugh his ass off, smoke some copium, and go right back to sleep.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, he is right. I mean, it pervades.
You're talking about applying Kantian metaphysics
I'm
to
happy
dogs,
that you
man.
agree with
Come
him,
on.
but I
And
still am
aliens.
confused.
Well, see, how about this? For example, with the dogs thing and the animals. Basically, what was being applied there was an a priori, right?
Yes.
It's better
Yes.
to defer to err on the side of caution. Who the hell said caution was something that you could err on the side of that constituted something ethical? Right.
Well, obviously, it's with the pre-assumption that.
Well, real quick, what I'm saying is like not that was specifically a Kantian assertion, but that it was Kantian in nature, and a lot of our thought is Kantian in nature in the sense of erring on the side of caution. How about this? Err on the side of you didn't present any reason for me to have asserted it in the first place. How about that? Right? Which is exactly what I contended with because I actually wanted to challenge this idea of erring on the side of caution. Right? Because there's a Kantian nature to that category. Right? It's just being presented a priori.
Erring to the side of caution is the same thing that's never actually the same thing that prohibits and inhibits you from actually understanding that objective truth that Kant was talking about. The thing that really he was describing through God that none of you want to address.
Right? I think I'm with you enough to accept what it is that you're basically going for, Marcus. However, I do have one question. How do you differentiate this from idealism? This is a big one.
Right. Good one. Idealism as well as nihilism and pessimism are the idea that we either do or do not have some causal relation with the world as nature, in the sense that either optimistically speaking, we can influence nature to the point where it somehow is good. We give a value equation, we add an episteme where you said a goal of science. Well, if the goal is to do something good, quote unquote, then perhaps we can achieve this in the quote unquote natural world. You can apply the same the other way around. What I would argue is the nature of nature is only known to nature itself. Note how every single one of us in here undeniably has an understanding of nature, of what is quote unquote natural. Note too how none of us are fully going to agree on what that state of nature is. You know why? Because nature as a totality is a picture, a momentarily evaluation of something which
Yes.
you continuously
Yeah.
synthesize with.
Yeah, to add on top of that, I wouldn't say there's any such thing as the state of nature. Like, that is itself a Kantian a
It just
priori.
is, right? Nature
Yeah.
just is. Doesn't give a fuck about seeming natural to you or seeming
Well, see,
orderly to you.
and
It
you know
just
what's so
is.
funny about that is the old metaphysicians like Lucretius and Heraclitus, they tried to let us know this. There is no state of nature. There is only that which is. And it
Correct.
is all in flux. Always. There is no state. It's like whenever you hear the term brain state, which is still being thrown around in the neurosciences. Brain state. There's no fucking such thing as a brain state. You're never in the same modality. Ever. Right? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you on this, man. Gotta say.
And I would go further and say that all we see before us passing, our sign and symbol, is alone. In the sense that all things which we do derive from this quote unquote world as nature are all things which have cognized themselves, actualized themselves within this world. So by deriving it from it, in a sense, they are dead. They have no more living force of that thing being natural, so to say, in it. The things that are natural and the things that we do see as actual nature being nature really are just form and symbols.
Okay. So would you say we're like sands passing through an hourglass?
We're nothing but grains of sand.
I would say we're the beach, we're the shores.
Did you guys ever see?
I was like sands.
I didn't smoke more copium to answer that question.
Did you guys ever see
These
Walk
are the
Hard?
days of our time. It's a fucking
Did you guys ever see the movie Walk Hard? The Ballad of Dewey Cox.
Walk Hard, yeah.
There's a part where they're
So
making
good.
fun of the Beatles, and the Beatles are just like they're getting high, talking to the Maharishi, and they're like, "We're nothing but
Yep.
grains of sand."
Yeah.
Basically. Anyway, I thought it was hilarious.
Well, that's the quote I was doing was from Bill and Ted's when they go back to meet Socrates and he holds the sand. He's like,
Socrates.
grains through an hourglass. These are the days of our lives, and it's actually like the theme from the Days of Our Lives, the fucking
Yeah.
soap opera.
If we're going for ancient Greeks, someone a lot more simple that introduced me first to fictionalism without obviously knowing it, neither me at the time nor the guy who introduced me, was Seneca. And
Yeah, some Seneca. Anyway, go.
it actually went through morals. I read this in a letter. This is called Letters to Lucilius, I think. It's by Seneca, right? And I was reading it, and it was basically a small text which had a bunch of moral maxims and ethics, which was privately sent to one of his cousins, I think. And in there, it said something that he was giving advice to his younger cousin, saying, "Think of your days as lived as dead. Each day that passes by is now dead, for time is the only commodity that we lend out to others that we cannot ever repay." Right? Sort of the real Stoic way of looking at time, which I think the Stoics really in that time are the first real philosophical group that looked at time precisely the way I do, which is the thing that gives life to space, whereas then space occupies it, kills time, gives death to time. Time has passed only when space has preoccupied it. And Seneca's saying, well, you are the space, man. He's saying you're the monad, because infinitesimal space doesn't exist to Seneca. He is saying as soon as your day is passed, that time is dead, and you've killed it. So you best make value of it, right? You best not
you
lend
can
it out.
actually kind of understand this in scientific terms, in the sense that, well, what we call infinitesimal or macro or microscopic, it's actually all relative, in the sense that even if I were to say, let's take a full-blown, just like objective approach at Einsteinian relativity. That's precisely what it's saying. Like, precisely. Like, it's saying time and space are relative. And they're relative to each of the different, what we might call monads, suspended within the totality of the universe.
What I would say is this, both in physics and metaphysics, is that space itself is relative to real space. I mean, real nature. And because our intuitive way of coping with things is to create a dualism in a Hegelian way, the dialectic of space is time. We apply time to things that we have already cognized as to be space.
Right.
Henceforth, then, both conceptually, space and time is what gives to space life, and space is what gives to time death. The year completes, right, once the orbit has completed, once the space is done occupying that which time is given.
Hey, Fate says, all I see are polyhedra. Where are the monads? Those are the monads. You fool.
Well, anyway, I would bore you all to sleep.
Look, you're hurting
Get another
everybody's
speaker,
brain.
man. Yes,
Yeah,
I'll use
Jesus
that.
God.
I love you all. In a fictional way, by the way.
Well, love is a fiction. Go on.
No, I have nothing to say.
Yeah, I thought we were done here. I mean,
What do you mean? This is your show. What do you mean that you have nothing?
I hijacked
talking
it.
So what's the
I
conclusion?
do want to say, hold on. I do want to say, Tristan, if you want to pop up here and like, let's maybe change the subject. I think this little tangent's gotten stale. Just me personally.
Wow, Scott.
Let's keep it.
Wow.
It has, but both of you guys just said we're done. Let's find another topic.
I'm just messing
This has become the G and Marcus agree with each other hour.
So sorry.
Continental sermons from our friends. No, that's okay.
Well, you know me. I hate those guys.
I know you're not a fan of most Continentals, so I'm just playing with you. But so,
real quick.
What did you want to talk about, Nivik? What's up?
Oh,
No, go ahead, Marcus.
well, just real quick, it's very trivial, right? But why the fuck do we have in history of philosophy calling the analytics and like the continentals? Why are we separating them when both of them physically were from like the mainland of Europe? They were all continentals. Like, why are we separating them?
Is that what you're going to be taught in school?
Yeah, well, I was.
Yeah, well, that's cool. That's what I'm going to go based on, the academic inflection point of it.
Well, by the time you graduate, you'd be wrong then, considering university changes its consensus every year, every semester.
Okay, I know that. I understand that.
Well, I mean, you know me, Mark.
It doesn't mean anything.
I try to go at things at a systemist approach, right? An architectonic approach, as Schopenhauer would say. You know what I mean? Like,
and you're the only guy that doesn't make me want to hang myself while you're doing it. So that's
right.
a compliment.
Like,
you know?
for example, it's not continental philosophy that pisses me off. It's continental philosophers, right? It's those guys, right? Because actually, whenever I analyze continental analytic, I actually don't see much of a real divide. And people like Mario Bunge didn't either, right? And he was one of the biggest systemists that we had. Right? Actually, he's kind of the face of systemism in a certain sense, right? And he didn't believe in all these divisions and stuff, right? He believed in integration, right? Structural synthesis. And I do too, right? So, anyway, I'm kind of with you on that too. I mean, look, we got to get Marcus off here. I'm just going to keep
structure in what way, G? Structure of a it doesn't matter. Like, it could be imaginary or reality, right?
Well, now, I mean,
structure of belief.
Well, what if? That's a hard question, and like it would take a lot of unpacking. But I'll give it.
Not
a
really.
shot. No, it really would, man. But I'll give it a go for you.
I mean, people like to believe in shit that's imaginary, and people like to believe in shit that's more grounded in reality.
Yeah.
There you go.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I thought you were asking me like, how could I unite them whenever the Continentals and the Analytics are doing that?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to
a lot of them are.
Marcus. I'm trying to get to Marcus' conclusion, like if shit exists or doesn't exist. It's
Hang on, Marcus. Hang on. 1 second. Continental philosophy entails synthesis. So I agree that there is continental philosophy and analytic because there were analytical and continental philosophers simultaneously. You know what I mean? So I get it.
Sure.
They bleed over. It's the same thing as like can't separate logic and emotions. We all have our sensibilities. But I mean, there are demarcations and there are separations between the two of understanding how to understand philosophy. Meta philosophy is separated into usually analytic philosophy and continental philosophy. I'm just going based on what I learned in school
No,
and
you're
Yes.
right,
self-teaching
100%.
and
So
autodidact.
why
You're
didn't
right.
we
So so
evolve to just be emotional then?
Well, Nivik, to
It's not as
answer.
useful.
Well, so exactly, Nivik, we do tell ourselves shit that isn't actually true, but not always voluntarily, right? So we do believe in shit that's not found in reality whatsoever. But guess what? We need to believe in shit that's not found into reality whatsoever. How else are we going to create things in reality that don't already exist?
Logic,
that's a
Well,
claim, yeah.
logic.
I mean, how about this? I mean, you
You
know,
you don't
for
have to
the
go
go on.
ahead. No, I'm just saying like but your understanding of the environment makes leads you to create um
Yes.
uh what doesn't exist.
Yes. This is called engineering. Um, But it's a problem. Like if you had a door that constantly just would not stay open, what are you gonna do? You're gonna invent a fucking door stop, right? I mean, you're gonna
Yeah.
figure out a way
Hey,
to put a
but
rock in
Scott,
front of
though,
that fucking
if I
door.
could if I
That's
could actually probe you on a little bit of that, you know how like in the labor force, whenever you get a new job at a little bit more of a professional kind of place, they would actually rather you have not worked at other places so that they can train you themselves.
hmm
You know what I'm talking about?
Yep,
So it's
absolutely.
like really what I'm kind of keying in on this particular topic is that basically we believe all of the schema that are presented to us up to the point that it begins not being useful, or in fact, not just not being useful, but actually deleterious at any given um,
Oh,
level of
I,
magnitude.
I don't know. I would say the history of religion proves that wrong.
Well, no. I mean, like religion has been one of the most useful things for obeying the emotional turmoil of doing the one thing most people really, really hate doing, and that is accepting reality.
How
Yeah,
about
but
this?
it's also
Religion's good for
hold
fucking
on,
up and
hold
learning
on,
from your
hold on,
mistakes. How's
Nightback,
that?
Nightback. Hold on. But that's the thing. Like, yeah, I mean, there are useful things that do come out of religion, but if we're talking about up until the point where it's deleterious towards us, towards our survival, I
Hmm.
mean, religion has been deleterious to the point like where we've had to like cut ties basically with the extremist, right? Like
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Well,
you
I
know what I
mean,
mean? Like it gets to a point where we do have to say like, okay, we can't go that far.
I don't know if you ever watched or listened to Hitch's old videos, but there was
Oh,
one famous one. A guy asked him, like, why would you be out here trying to take away that thing that gives so many people so much joy and so much security? And basically, Hitch responds, well, that's a stupid question. And I've already told you guys that I don't care what toy you play with, right? I already know that this is everybody's favorite toy. But
But you could only bend your delusion so far though, right?
yeah.
Well,
With
no, I
reality.
mean, no, as long as it's, again, in the sort of Jordan Petersonian sense, true enough to get you to the other side of tomorrow.
Exactly. Because at a certain point, you can't just believe in whatever you want to believe.
Bingo.
You have to adapt to reality, your environment.
And our dear Marcus here, I do believe, is grouping the concept or the framework that we call science right into that, just the same way as he
Yeah.
would, religion. Because another
Well,
thing that
you mentioned
another,
religion, but we moved more away from a religious
yeah,
worldview
but
when it
I was
comes to
just going to say,
interpreting
but
shit.
sure. But I was just going to say, when it comes to Hitch, also used to say, religion was our first time at philosophy, our first time at physics. You know what I mean? It was our worst time because it was our first time. but it was in fact those processes back then.
Religion more teach you from mistakes, not teach you in what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not religious, and I scour religious texts all the time because I find them of
You touched there on something very, very crucial. Something all of us, even the systemists, cannot look away from, which is the fact that all cultures that ever produced a philosophy of science, have all been influenced in their predominant early years by religious teaching.
You
Whether we're
didn't you
talking
didn't
about
understand what I just said. I said it teach from fucking up by moving more away from a religious worldview
Yeah, that's
right,
precise.
more
Yeah, that's
towards
kind of what
in
Nivik
what
was saying. Yeah.
in where the lessons were interpreted
right.
wrong in not what to do but
Well,
what
hold
not
on,
to do.
Nivik. I'm not saying that's unique to us. I'm saying this is a systematic, it seems, physiognomic form which we can see in all high cultures which have produced philosophies of science. Before they've produced philosophy of science, they have produced philosophies of religion and art.
To put
We
this in
have,
mathematical terms, it's a common
yeah.
denominator, right?
Yeah,
Well,
because fairy tales and pixie dust doesn't really work. So I
it
guess we should
works,
be more
Nivik.
grounded to
It
reality.
works so well because how else are you going to believe in ethics? How else are you going to believe in
It works
dignity?
so
How
well
else are
in
you
a
going to
way
believe in
it
honor?
teaches you it teaches you a lesson of
Failure.
mistakes that were made of
Hmm.
it wasn't like the progress wasn't because of, it
Doesn't
was
science
despite
do the same
the
thing?
progress wasn't because of, it was despite of religion.
Right.
Okay.
Isn't science the same thing then? Where science studies the cause and effect in the material world, religion studies the destiny and potentiality of that of the soul or
You're
spiritual
just
world.
talking through your biases is all you're doing.
I don't know. Well, Nivik, I think you were
This is
half right about that, but I don't think you were right about the second half of what you said in the sense that it actually was religious institutions that gave us the modern scientific um, sort of framework, even if it no, not framework, infrastructure, right? So all of this comes from philosophy, but it's not that
Well,
no ethics or
you
belief.
guys are looking at things wrong. It's like if you had a math book and there's logic in there, but you added shit of what you wanted to believe, and just because there's fairies and Santa Claus in there doesn't necessarily have what's logical in there validate what's illogical in there. You don't necessarily, that's how come I'm saying it wasn't because of, it was despite
Yeah,
of.
but that's precisely the point that the fictionalist would be making. Like specifically that right there. Just because it's in there and just because it was useful doesn't make it true. But it
because
might just be true enough.
because people who come bring religion to me, my argument is, give me a reason why I need it
Right. Yeah.
in order to function.
Well,
And
that's the true enough part, right?
I'm not really being given, well, yeah, it's like I don't necessarily need it to be moral. I don't necessarily need it to be logical. And the
Right.
thing about it is, what it does is it combines it combines what's imaginary with what's true, and it makes the metaphor more, it more validates the metaphor than reality. It's kind of like if you watch a movie and it's in more believing in Thanos and Spider-Man than believing in the meaning of the movie. It actually fucks shit up, to be honest. I mean, it's better to just be
I
artistic than
agree.
religious, because you more care about the delusion than you care about reality when you're religious. Just read a story, or go to the movies and watch killer fairies, and not end up believing that they more matter than the imaginary being in the movie more matter than what's being what than the reality in the movie. It's actually anti-reality. It's anti-logic. It's like if you believed in a movie more believed in the killer fairies more, then you left the movie and you start killing people because they tell you to kill, they tell you to kill people in the movie, so you actually do that in real life. You separate the art from
this is the point, man.
you separate the art from, I mean that, yeah, with art you separate the metaphor from the story. With religion, you take the metaphor literally.
I would cause you to not look at history with such revisionist linear vision, because think of a time where there is no such thing as logic. Perhaps even think of a time where most people cannot read or write, and where all knowledge is taught rather by an aristocratic religious class, a priestly class, which reads from this book or manual of all topics of philosophy, which then later leads to religiosity being challenged by the very systems that it taught. Like I said, this isn't just unique to our culture. It's unique to all cultures that have a significant philosophy of science. It was as much to the Greeks as it was to the Egyptians, to the Chinese, to the Mexican, as it is to us. This seems to be not just fundamental to our understanding of science today, but to all science in general. Like I said, science is a way of understanding the world as nature. Religion is an understanding the world as destiny. Religion tries to study that and explain that.
What does destiny and soul
potentiality.
And all that stuff mean?
Potentiality.
What does potentiality in terms of destiny mean?
Well, as the formalists of the past have put it, I'd like to put forth the idea that perhaps there's a metaphysical realm of potentiality. Now, if you are...
So, are you saying supernatural realm of... Because metaphysics means something different here.
Well, I don't think it does. I don't mean supernatural.
Describe to me what you mean by metaphysics, then.
Well, I think it was described earlier. I think I'm in complete agreement how G explained it prior to this to... what was his name? Hassim? I think it was his name. I completely agree with everything he said there.
Sure.
I think we have the same definition of metaphysics.
What are some of the concepts, the main concepts, central questions, we'll say, in metaphysics?
Just for shits and giggles, just repeat.
Yeah, just for the fuck of it. Why not, right?
Sure. Metaphysics is that specific genre, as you will, which is not a unique category. Having a systematic approach to what it is will not work. It's the thing that mutates or modalizes into any other form of philosophy, and it is the very thing which manifests both in the physical as in the inwardly and outwardly felt. It is quite literally philosophy, as G would say.
So metaphysics and philosophy is synonymous with you.
Not just that. I would say that philosophy at its most fundamental level, for everyone participating in it, is strictly metaphysical. I think in order to derive any epistemological claim, you have to first subscribe to what you call a metaphysical fact. Now, fact is not by any means deduced from truth, only by the Anglo-empiricist tradition, which makes me want to fucking squeeze my balls off my body.
So I feel you. So we still haven't addressed any of the central questions in metaphysics, and I understand that you say
believe what you want to believe.
I understand that you say metaphysics is the same as philosophy, and that is how you see it. But I see the central questions in metaphysics, and the supernatural is a part of understanding metaphysics because you're answering the questions: what is there and how is it, right? But I mean, the ontology is a branch of metaphysics.
How is it would be
being, identity and change over time, space and time, causality, necessity and possibility.
No,
these things deal with
causality.
With metaphysics.
No, causality quite literally is physics. It literally is physics. Causality is not concerned by any means by metaphysics.
Well, kind
that
of.
would be imagination.
I mean, whenever you take metaphysics in school, basically what you are exploring is identity and causality, right? Why it is that deduction actually works and what it is you're applying deduction to.
Yes,
right.
Which is not metaphysics.
Induction or deduction.
Right.
Well, yeah. I mean,
identity.
That's why. Well, that's why there's a big question in philosophy as to whether or not it's most appropriate to start with metaphysics or start with epistemology. Whereas I think you and I would both agree that you can't start with epistemology. This is just stupid to even to assert it.
Yeah.
At the final analysis.
Yes.
But yeah, you are fundamentally, in a sort of Lucretian sense, in a Heraclitean sense, exploring that which is. I said this earlier, right? And that which is has an identity, right? And it also has it's bound to the law of causality, right? And the logos,
right?
Right.
Well, like these
So
are all metaphysical terms. Notice what the logos, infinitesimal space, monad, time all have in common. None of them are part of the world. There are things which we construct super materialistically or metaphysically, as the Greeks would say, of what the world actually is. Right? So space doesn't exist. Borders don't exist. They exist only if we draw them. Right?
does that thing that we call space, like let's say we dispense with the language, we dispense
Right.
with the symbolic
Right.
representation.
Now we're getting
Does that
somewhere.
thing that we call space, does it exist? Is it part of that which
Yes, but here's the catch. It exists outside of us.
So I am not, in some regard, constitutive. Space is not constitutive of me, myself, as a thing itself.
No, you are a separate monad of space, correct. Plus, there is always the dissonance between you and the space. Because again, we mentioned the world picture. There is no actual way, not systematically. The only thing you could argue is, of course, the human experience as a totality, which, well, systemizing that is impossible, I would argue. But you're attempting, and my compliments to it. What I'm saying is that could be argued as the only modality for which it actually is a part of the logos. If you, as soon as you construct this idea of nature, or the world as nature, or the world as space, or the world as this, you are quite literally just projecting a fiction of parts of that world, which might correspond or correlate with what is actually the world.
You're placing it in a dead shell, basically, and saying, well, it's bound to this.
Yes. Whereas what space actually is not bound to fucking anything. It's continuously in the process of unbinding itself.
It doesn't give a shit about what you think, in fact.
Exactly.
Doesn't care. Doesn't fucking care. No, I'm with you.
If we go back to religion and science, what are metaphysically religion and science but ways of coping with this? Culturally and individually, because all culture is made up from individuals, which together, individuals are organs, cultures are organs. Individuals born, live, die. Cultures born, live, die. Individuals cope with shit in their life, right?
Yep. So then the only way to not cope is to like have your view of fictionalism, right? That's the only non-coping method, right?
No, not what I'm saying.
Decopify your life.
Could you be wrong? Wait a minute, Marcus. Could you be wrong about your assertions of fictionalism?
No. Wrong as in what sense?
Bullshit.
Wrong as in.
I do not give a shit, Marcus. That's the silliest thing I've heard you say, bro.
Well, no. Wrong as in what sense? Appealing to the systematic of fictionalism?
It's getting spicy in here. It's getting spicy
the
in
Marcus
here.
show. The Marcus
not
and
a
G show. Go for it, guys.
Well, I'm saying I've read through thousands of papers, I kid you not, on fictionalism, recent papers published in European as well as American and Canadian academia.
I don't care if you are the smartest individual on planet Earth.
This is not about intellect. This is not about sounding smart, man.
No, it's not.
Well, great.
Are you
hang
like
on,
going to authority here?
Hang on, Nivik, stop. If you say that you could not be wrong about, and I know there's caveats that you have to say, but it's a simple question. Could you be wrong about your ideas of fictionalism and how they play into to your metaphysics? Could you be wrong about that? Could you be seriously wrong about it? Because I could be seriously wrong about how I see the scientific method. I admit it.
Right, you're comparing apples and pears here, and wrong according to what metric?
Well, now
the metric of a consensus of the scientific method.
It is a good
right,
question.
But what consensus? Because, could I be wrong to 5 different people that have a PhD assigned paper criticizing my science?
Could you be wrong in accordance with that aspect of space and time and stuff that doesn't give a shit?
You mean my own? You mean my own?
No, I mean in terms of fictionalism. In this interpretation, this prism through which you're analyzing things.
Right. Not at all, no. Precisely because you are separating them from what is real. By separating the fiction from that which is not appearing to be fiction whatsoever, the form, the shape, the symbol of something which is reoccurring. For example, what I pointed out earlier, when Nivik mentioned this thing about religion, and how we establish, hey, it seems to be that religion leads to science for us and not just for us. Do we have any direct correlation culturally with ancient Greece, with ancient China, with ancient Egypt, with ancient Mexico? We do not. How come we have these similarities? It seems like this is a intuitive thing, part of the human condition. These are parts of truth which can only be established by separating it from that which is fiction. Once you have established something to be fiction and to be fictional, which of course you can be wrong about that assessment, but once you do have assessed that it is, which nature will tell you whether or not it's fiction. If you think you can fly, go ahead and try. Nature will tell you whether or not you can fly.
Yep.
Once you have established,
here's the thing, Marcus. I've read 1,001 papers on non-fictionalism, and
right.
there's no way that I can be
You
wrong.
interrupted me making that
Saying
statement. I
everything
was
that
not
you're
saying that
saying.
that proves that I'm wrong or right. I was saying that it seems to me there's just no universal. Before you strawman my position, it seems to me that there's no formal consensus that university has to offer.
How about you just listen for a sec instead of just fucking going and going and going
Marcus,
and
you talk
going?
about
Well,
interrupting,
Christ,
right?
dude.
People sit here and they listen to you go on for a
not
long
at all.
fucking
I've
time,
been
and the minute they
continuously getting
talk, you
interrupted by
jump.
four of you.
Dude,
No,
like,
man.
do you get my
You
criticism
hold
right
court
now?
here.
Hold
People
on,
I
listen.
don't,
hold
Scott,
on, Marcus.
whatsoever. I do
Hold
not.
on, hold
No.
on, Marcus. Do you get my criticism when I say I've read 1,000? You said I read 1,000 papers on fictionalism. I give
What
you
was I
that.
going to say afterwards before you cut me off?
Hold on.
Then
Let me finish my fucking point, dude.
right.
So you said you read 1,000 papers on fictionalism. I said I read 1,001 papers on non-fictionalism, and I
Right.
know that I cannot be wrong by everything that I've read. I know there's no possible way that I can be wrong, and everything that I've read says that you're wrong.
Okay. Can I now finish what I was saying before you cut me off and reconstructed just completely fabricated the second part of my sentence? I was pointing out the fact that within the thousands of papers I've read through in the last 2 weeks, I have not yet found any consensual agreement between academians or anyone that is writing papers on this on what fictionalism is. There seems to be new fields of fictionalism emerging as we speak.
Yep.
That's what I am pointing out. So
with
hold on, when Thomas is asking me, could you consider yourself to be wrong about fictionalism? According to what standard, what metric? If you're asking academia, it doesn't seem that there's a right and wrong, currently speaking, of what is fictionalism. I mean, I'm reading through papers on the daily on this. Every single person, I've read women who are talking about fucking magic being a metaphysical thing and that being fiction. I've read about other people arguing for modal fictionalism, etc.
Hold on.
Well, perhaps let me finish then.
Marcus,
Perhaps let me finish.
Marcus, please, dear God, dude, you got to make your point without talking for 5 minutes every time you say
It's
something.
not easier when you let me speak.
1,000 different examples, dude. No, dude.
Right.
Like you were doing this every time. Like every time somebody asks you a question, like you go off on a fucking diatribe and you're sitting there on your soapbox talking for fucking 5 minutes straight, and you just want everybody to listen to you. How about you just say your position and let other people respond, dude? Like it is dragging now, dude. And dude, I like you, man. I don't have any big issue.
I like you too, Marcus. But he's right.
Right now, you're not letting anybody else get in. Anytime somebody.
So what is your point? What is your point? Because you
show peen or just be done with it.
Well, what is
Just
your
pass,
point?
like take a good puff and pass the fucking blunt. Is his point?
I'm passing it. Who wants to take a hit?
Well, I will say this. K-Dot brought up a pretty cool point. We Africans taught the Greeks. So I don't praise them too much. They stole our books and forgot to thank us. That damn Alexander, not so great.
He's an issue with
genius.
You see how G made a point and fucking made it quick and sweet and fucking was done.
I wouldn't contest it.
That's all I'm saying, Marcus.
He's right.
That's all I'm saying.
Dude, Plotinus was from Alexandria, so was Ptolemy. He's right. That's in Egypt, man. That's Africa. He's right.
You're missing the point that I just.
You know what, Marcus? Every time you talk, Marcus. Guess what? Every time you talk, I'm gonna say it in under 1 second, within of your 10 minutes.
You're so good at it, Nivik. Every time I say something, you take the words right out of my mouth and finish my thought for me. Perfectly eloquent. You're right. You should really do that. That will very much get to the point.
Well, can I ask K-Dot to come up here and give us his what for on the Africans teaching the Greeks?
I want to hear this too. Yeah.
Sure, more than welcome to call in. Go ahead. Anyone.
Yeah, please, guys, call in. Let's get
the call-in show. No, guys, I'm writing in our
call-in show.
Can't talk right now.
I enjoy the banter. It's fun.
But
I don't
mine,
mind listening.
I really
I
know
don't mind
Ailey
listening
wants
to
to
different
call in.
views.
He's writing an article. I hope it's on fictionalism, Cato, and please publish it, please.
Well, what do you think about all this, Tom?
What about fictionalism and stuff?
Well, just everything that's been stated up to this point. Where are we standing?
Wow, that's a lot. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
remember a
I'm
good
asking the big
portion of
one.
it. Um, I mean, I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. I just really don't. I've been trying to follow. I was reading a little bit during half of it, and then I was trying to follow towards the last 2 or 3 minutes. Um, I don't know. I kind of said my point earlier. I don't disagree that there may be some societal fiction. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it because I haven't done enough studying into this new field that he's talking about. It seems very esoteric. I don't know enough about it to make even a critique on it. So I just, until I am going to take the null hypothesis in terms of statistics and say I disbelieve the claim until I either understand it better or have evidence for it. Um, that's all I
Well,
can
that'd be
take a
less the
stand
null
on.
hypothesis and more the rejection of the hypothesis,
No, I
right?
mean the
Yeah.
null hypothesis in philosophy is just stating that that you can make a statement, then you have the null hypothesis, then you have alternative hypothesis. It's
Well,
different than the
Thomas,
statistical one. So
what
hang
would be
on,
your
god dang it,
criteria of
son.
truth? What would be your criteria of truth then?
It's different depending on the situation, but it's a combination of a few. It's kind of custom
Well, what about this situation specifically?
with what?
Right. Well, I'm not vouching for quote unquote fictionalism as a whole because again, I don't consider it to be a thing. But what I just said about fictionalism, how would you? What would be enough quote unquote truth or evidence for you to say, yeah, this is true? What would be your episteme or criteria of truth?
I don't know. Episteme is a word from Aristotle's language. I don't know, man. I don't know enough about fictionalism to critique it. I haven't even heard.
Well,
I had never heard of it before
How
you.
would you
So I
go
mean,
about critiquing it?
I am interested in it. I don't know how I'd go about critiquing it. I don't know what it's really about.
oh,
I read a
can I
general
try to
summary that
answer?
was. God dang, Nivik. I was reading a general summary of maybe like 2 paragraphs, and it was similar to the paragraph that G was reading. So if you want like my real answer on it, it's just going to be I don't know. So go ahead, Nivik. I'm sorry.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah, if you're coming of predetermined outcome, a threat across the street, the 10,000 pound truck, based off your understanding of the thread and it being very thin, its makeup and the truck, you'll likely go through it then get stopped by it.
Yeah, I remember this metaphor from you. I got you.
All right.
So what you believe, predetermined belief more aligns with reality of of your of your thoughts and of what you think and what likely will become and you do that in a way in a confirmation way in where it leads to your survival.
Okay.
So if you don't get so if you see the truck slam into the thread, it doesn't go nowhere and it just explodes. It's like shit. Okay, well, I guess well, my understanding of reality, what it is, it's completely off. I'm not getting any confirmation. You're you're not being guided by faith. By you're being reassured with information, and information is it's insurance. It's reassurance of what more likely become, and where you get more of a you end up people would cope more because they would understand what likely will be, and I think that's a lot of times where people become religious is like not having the knowledge and logical understanding of what might happen.
I got you, brother. Wrap it up.
People would just end up make up what they want in order to cope, because
Nivik,
things are too beyond them, knowledge and logic wise and understanding, and they're not. Then there's and a lot of times fear comes from not understanding. So and consequences come from not understanding. So people will just make shit up in order to cope from lack of understanding.
Nivik,
Okay.
do you have faith in the sun coming up tomorrow?
No.
You kind of can't. That's what I'm saying. By that logic, you're kind of like, if faith is the causation of all copium, then you can't have faith in anything, right?
No, I mean, to doubt it would be faith. That's what I would say.
Why? Well, okay, but
Because
that's not
you have
why?
no reason to have asserted that it might be another way.
Um,
Yeah, this would be the
sure,
problem of induction.
sure.
This is a
Not
problem.
one that doesn't include some sort of belief or some sort of faith.
Well, exactly. Like what's funny is you're
Whereas I
referencing a
don't
belief.
have to.
Well, you do. That
Whereas
is a
I
belief. You're saying your
no,
belief's
it's
superior
not.
to the other's belief because it's never
No,
been
it's not a
other.
belief. No, seriously, it's not a belief. I don't believe the sun's coming up tomorrow. It's
Okay.
going to. I don't
Wow.
need to believe it.
Well, perhaps we have a misunderstanding of what the word belief is then. Faith.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
mean,
Nivik used, right? But yeah.
Well, psychologically, he could have a belief about it, but his belief is irrelevant to whether the sun comes up tomorrow, is I think what he's saying.
Yeah, I mean, I
of
dispense
course.
with the concept of belief entirely, except for what's naturally emergent out of the human brain just as a
I mean, yeah,
function,
you are going to
right?
have a psychological
Mhm.
yes or no value in your brain about the sun, whether you like it or not. You know what I mean? That's a neural pathway. You know about the sun. Yeah, you can't
Yeah.
Yeah, but
unless
it's like
somebody hits you with
you'll
a
notice
hammer
it's real
and you
fun though.
forgot
It's
about it.
like if I dispense with the belief and I say, no, I don't believe the sun's coming up tomorrow. It is coming
What?
up. Let's see how
Again?
often I'm wrong.
Yeah, but what Thomas just
How
said.
often am I going to be wrong?
Well, with
Never,
this one,
right?
well, I'm not going to argue for or against it. But what Thomas just said is interesting, because knowing this,
Sure.
knowing that, as he put it, your psychological, or as I put it, inwardly felt relationship with the consensus data you're getting off the sun gives you a relation with the sun itself. Now, the sun itself exists in space as well as in your space, which you have created from the world picture of that sun. Therefore, you are undeniably always influenced by this psychological, as Thomas put it, bias of what the sun is. That's what's causing you
Yeah, I
to
mean, we can only see it through our sensory inputs. We don't have an idea
Exactly.
of what the sun is in
Yeah.
itself. We only have
Exactly.
what we can
Sure.
phenomenologically gather from our sensory data in influx.
Well, I know there's
So,
definitely
yes.
energy there, right, in itself, right? There's all kinds of things that I'm not going to know about the item in question, but the item in question is known to me. As in, I don't require belief.
yeah, I mean, the
I am
appearance is
only
there. I
existent
get it.
because of
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
Well,
right?
the item existing versus the item behaving, and the item behaving in a time that's not yet passed, that's a completely different thing. Well, I don't think
Oh, I
anyone
don't.
would disagree that like the sun
Oh, I would.
exists.
Oh, the sun exists. Yeah, yeah. No, I would say the behavior is an indication of existence, right?
Oh
Like that's one of
yeah,
those basic metaphysical categories. It's like, oh, does it behave? Yes.
of
Okay,
course.
then it exists,
But
right?
we can say too that the sun has both a behavior and is a thing, right? Which act separate in the sense that we base our time off of the sun's behavior, not the sun itself.
Well, I mean, you know where I'm going to take this. I'm going to say no. It has magnitude, it has behavior, it has a field of effect, and it has properties. Now,
Yes.
that is the thing in itself. Categorically, there's nothing outside of that we know of that can possibly be applied to it. Right? Those are the
What
four
about time?
categories.
So those four modals are
Effect.
the thing in itself.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
okay.
we're
I
not
was just
even
making sure.
behaving. We're not even behaving to the sun. We're
This is
responding
weird.
to the planet revolving around the sun.
Sure. I mean, we have. I mean, no. I mean, I think it's all in. Well, there is no non-behavior. All of it is behaving in relation to everything else, right?
Mhm.
But no,
Hence why the,
I would say it's interacting with everything else, like space and
yeah,
radiation and taking on new atoms and
yeah.
all that shit.
yeah, yeah. I
Changing
would
gradiently.
categorically rank that into the category of behavior, right? So interaction is
right.
going to be behavior. disintegration behavior, goal-oriented action behavior.
Okay.
It's all just categorically set up like that, in the sense that like those are the basic categories of apprehension, as far as I'm concerned.
I think that's a grave mistake, a giant mistake.
Hold on. Just to be clear, G, you're referring to behavior as a response to some sort of stimuli, right? Period. Into story, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Like unequivocally. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So Marcus, when he's talking about behavior, he's talking about like even the way like water molecules would behave by evaporating once sunlight hit them, right? Once
I'm glad you brought that back into.
How is that behavior?
Explain your four modal operators to, or is that what you call them, modal operators, or modal?
I call them holons, but
holons,
basically they're modal categories.
Modal categories. There you go.
Right. So basically, any sort of action, that's behavior. Any sort of activity, any sort of orientation in terms of energy exchange, however you want to look at things doing stuff. That's basic, right? So if you were to break it down to the most, like, I'm teaching it to an 8th grader, right? Things doing stuff is a category, right? Okay. Doesn't matter if it's
Gee, can I address what you're saying real quick? You're saying like people learn from experience.
No, G's not talking about people, Nivek. G's talking about everything.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, G's talking about his four modal property, or four modal holons that describe from which all nature becomes from.
But you get experience from behavior, though.
You do, yeah, 100%.
That's what I'm addressing. I'm just saying, like, you don't necessarily have to experience a particular act based off your understanding of what one thing and another thing is. You could come to a logical outcome of a predetermined outcome of what would happen.
I think you can only do that through experiencing things it's related to.
So if I took a like a large sheet of paper and a Mack truck on top of it, you're telling me I'm going to have to see the truck sitting on top of the paper and conclude whether
because you
or not it would go through.
No, because you already have analyzed both the paper and the truck in terms of its magnitude, in terms of its behaviors, in terms of its properties, and in terms of, guess what, its area of effect, right? And whenever you have all of those, your brain does this naturally, right? You know that a truck is not going to be one of those things that, can be, compared to like a piece of paper. Why? Well, because of its magnitude, because of its properties, and because of its behavior and its field of effect. I mean, like, this is stuff your brain latches onto.
Yeah,
you already
know. My point is, logic is a guesstimate, predetermined outcome of what would happen.
Logic is not that.
Yeah,
absolutely
logic is
not.
Definitely not.
No,
100% Nivek, not that. Yeah, no.
Logic is a conceptualization post the process which G is describing. So once you now have gone through one of these modalities, that's where you apply logic. You've now got this data, you've seen the shit, you've touched the shit, you've smelled the shit. Now you're going to dissect the shit.
It was what I was keying in on whenever Kane was talking about the water droplet. I thought, wait a second. If you know enough about the water droplet to add another water droplet to it, it is not ambiguous. You have two monads, so to speak, two systems, water, molecules or atoms or whatever, that you know are separate and can place them together. All of this is behaviorally understood. It's understood by the person behaviorally connecting them, the difference in magnitude and the difference in properties, right? And the difference in the field of effect for each individual system that's being combined, right? So basically, I'm analyzing that stuff all along those lines right there. Behavior, effects, magnitude. You see what I'm saying? So that's kind of what I was keying in on with Kane. And basically, I'm kind of glad it got brought back up, honestly.
It's all right. I wanted you to explain it to the audience what you meant by your four modal categories.
Right. So there's four of them, right? So you have property or properties. You have behavior or behaviors. You have effect or effects. And you have magnitude. So those are the 4 dimensions, the 4 basic categories of apprehension. As in, there isn't any other form of apprehension that falls outside of this. It'll all be contained within this.
This is consciousness interacting with any object, right?
It's 100% true. It's 100% true.
Gee, this is lacking a major aspect.
Go for it.
Time.
No, it's effect.
No, it's not. Time is not an effect at all.
Time is definitely part of G's idea.
Yeah.
Where is it? Where is it?
We're guessing. What do you mean, where?
No,
I think it's when. No, I don't know. I'm just
time is an effect. You're saying what is it an effect of?
All things.
I also want to know what
metaphysics. This is his ontology.
Hold on, metaphysics, Marcus. Fundamentally, you cannot have an effect unless you have time, unless you have the changing of systems, right? Period. There's no way around that, right?
Which is exactly where I'm at.
That is where time comes in to G's.
No, time has already been there. That's how the effect happens because of time. Before.
With
what? Conceptually.
When did it happen?
The effect.
Just now. When?
The effect, yeah. That's what I'm saying, dude.
Well, the effect is post-time. Time comes preemptively to the effect.
Time is one of those things that's grouped in with categorically, all effects.
Yes.
It
comes before all those effects.
It can't.
It quite literally does. Otherwise, time would have been passed. Once the effects are affecting themselves.
We've never known or experienced anything like what you're talking about. There is no
Yes, we are.
time.
Conceptually, we are. Oh my God! You're saying time ticks because things happen?
No, Marcus, you need to actually look into what conceptions of time actually.
That's ridiculous, man. That is ridiculous. Metaphysically, that is beyond crazy. I
it's
think.
not. That's why I'm saying it's like if you wanted to knock this over, you would have to be able to just present to me a case for why this isn't contained within the category of effect.
Okay,
you'd have to be able to do that. Now, if you can, go for it.
I think I already have. I think we covered this before, but. I metaphysically stand quite the opposite. That space gives life to, time gives space life, and space gives time death. In the sense that preemptively to any space, there needs to be time. Space itself, conceptual space, is a concept. In the sense that what the modalities that you're talking about, the holons, are conceptual. And not just that, there's another flaw. You said something about
that wasn't a flaw. That was just you reiterating basically what I've already said. If time and space give anything, that's effect.
How do I know an effect exists? Do I need to experience it? Do I need to observe it?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I observe something, does time need to allow that thing to affect or be in effect? What if it has already passed? Or what if it hasn't happened yet?
Time was the unfolding of all of those things interacting, creating the ability for you to apprehend it.
All these things happening and unfolding themselves happened because time gave the space to it.
How does time give anything to anything? Time is
it's the dialectic of space. And space itself is in dialectic with the world as is.
Okay, so that's behavior then.
Well, let's call it effect, like you were calling it. So an effect can only... Right? No. An effect can only occur if time gives place to it again.
Well, that's behavior. Even if you jumped out of the...
Time is not a behavior.
You just said it gives.
Well, it allows, rather. It allows a space to be.
That's behavior.
Yeah.
Well, the space being is behavior, but the time allowing isn't.
Hold on, Marcus. If you're making the claim that time is a property in and of itself, the same way like gravity is...
no, I'm making the concept that time is a concept of itself. That's the argument I'm making. And I'm making an argument against the statement that G was making, that he knows because of this.
Well, if it's...
Jesus Christ, can I fucking finish what I'm saying? Jesus, guys. Go, G.
No, if it's a concept, then that's a behavior. Right.
Well, then all your holons are simply behavior.
Yeah, it's metaphysics.
Well, I don't think so necessarily. I mean, but all right.
Yeah,
it is metaphysical, sure. But so you wouldn't agree with me then when I say time gives birth to space and space gives death to time. You don't believe in this dualism, do you?
I mean, it could be so, but what I'm saying is those effects and those behaviors all go into those two categories.
I don't think so at all. I think precisely time does not. Hence the reason why you're struggling to
What
make
is time?
sense when you the dialectic of space. The
So
opposite,
that's a
quite
behavior,
the
right?
opposite. No, it's a lack of behavior of anything. If space is behavior, then time would be a lack of behavior.
That doesn't make any sense, dude. That's what I'm saying.
It does.
If
You're
it's a
familiar with
dialectic,
Hegel.
if it's dialectic, then it's behavior. If it's not a dialectic and it exists as space and time as a dichotomy by which
Not in the
things can
literal
happen
sense.
within
Can you
inside
guys?
of it.
I'm trying to follow this. I swear to God, I'm trying. Can you break down the dialectic part that you're talking
Well,
about? Because explain it to me like
yes.
I'm an idiot.
Okay, I'm not talking about literal dialecticism, talking back and forth between two people. What I'm talking about is what Hegel was talking about. So you have two things, hot and cold, together. Guess what they do? They make up temperature. They make up your
Synthesize,
concept
yeah.
of right. Exactly.
So
So
properties and
exact.
behaviors. in
So his
effect.
his
Yes.
abstract, concrete, and whatever else he called it. I can't remember the
Yes.
There you have
synthesis,
it.
thesis, and antithesis. I got you. I'm with you. I got you.
Yes.
Check.
Yeah, but
Check. All right.
Sure.
What I'm saying, it's all intuitively, right? So intuitively, when we burn our hand and we feel something cold, we make that a pair. We do it so neurologically instinctively that we do this conceptually as well. And we do it with the concept of space. So our concept of space, right, the opposite of it being time. Space itself is always cognized because when we're seeing it, it is either in the process of actualizing itself, has actualized itself, or is actualizing
I'm not
itself.
following. I'm not
Hold
following.
on.
Opposite of space is
Hold
time.
on.
What
That
does that mean?
certainly wouldn't be the
Oh
opposite.
my God.
But
You know,
Marcus,
still,
have
never mind.
patience.
I'm
Have
just
patience.
trying to
Scott-
follow.
Scott-
I'm just trying to follow.
I know,
I-
Nivik. Scott's been
I-
trying to get this out for a while.
dude,
All right,
like,
all right.
so like this is why I ask you, Marcus, like, because to me, like, how much have you actually looked into what the notion of time means? Because to me, it sounds like what you're trying to make the claim that time is a thing in and of itself. I don't think that's the case. I don't think we have any sort of evidence that shows that to be the case.
What do you
What we
mean by that,
do
Scott?
have, what we do have is we have evidence shows that time is just our way of measuring the change of events, right? I mean,
Yep.
that's like that. That's as far as anybody's
Physicists
ever
assume time
fucking
right
gone.
now as our current understanding as space-time, so they
Yeah.
consider it a continuum. But I mean, there are theorists out there that think that space-time there's a more fundamental property than that, and G touches on it with his neuralism, and I understand what you guys are. I'm really trying to follow you guys. I just don't understand some of the terms, so that's why I had to ask a minute ago. But go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, because like if you're making a claim that time is a thing, I would like any sort of demonstration of time as a thing, and saying time is the opposite of space, that literally means nothing, right? I mean, what is where does that actually get us? Because I can
Just
say
explain
I
that.
can say cats are the opposite of dogs, but what is that? Does that actually mean anything? Where does that actually get us? Right. So time is the opposite of space. The opposite of space to me means absolutely nothing. Now, if you have some
Just let him
sort of like,
explain it. Explain
hold
it.
on, Nybeck, please, fucking let me finish, man. God damn. Like now, if you could explain what you actually mean by that, like what your conception of time is. That's
I
literally
just did. I did. What you did again is like I explained,
Hold
and
on,
then
hold
you
on,
complain about me not explaining
Marcus,
adequately, but
Marcus,
you only
please,
took
for the
parts of what I
love of
said
God,
and then
Marcus,
reconstructed what I said
stop.
simply to criticize.
No, I'm not criticizing. I'm asking for clarification.
I just clarified. I
No,
literally
you
just
did
did
not.
before you started.
Christ
Do you want
Almighty.
me
Okay,
to
just
repeat myself
talk
again?
to me like a puppy in a
I mean,
5-year-old. Break it down to that level. And
Marcus,
it's
and
too
go
kinky for my
slow.
liking.
Marcus, real quick, Marcus, please, for the love of God, I want to give you a tip. If you're ever talking with somebody and somebody says, "Can you explain to me what you mean by that?" What they're asking for is clarification. And if you ever say, "I just said that," you're going to get the same fucking response over and over again. So if you're ever trying to make ground with somebody in a conversation, don't do that shit. It gets you nowhere fast. If somebody asks you that, they're asking for a clarification. And the simple
Thanks for the
answer
tip.
is just clarify what the fuck you're saying instead of saying, "Oh, I
Thanks for the
just said
tip.
that."
Thanks for the tip.
Jesus
I'll give you a tip in return and say, before you ask me a question, consider the 3 Socratic questions before you do so. Because this is the third time now you try to reconstruct what I said. It's not what I said at all. I explained that space itself is conceptual,
Reconstruct
like
anything.
time itself is intuitively in a dialect to our conceptualization of space.
And
That's
what
as
does
simple
that
as I
mean?
can make it.
If that's as simple as you can make it, then fucking good luck, buddy.
I'm
I
sorry,
mean,
you need more
I
than
was
like
I
one
would say I
Okay.
tetrad
just
to understand. My
So
apologies.
I
space
Fucking hell.
is the opposite of time, right?
Well, so we see shit, right? And the shit seems to be existent somewhere, but we don't know everything about that existence. We know only what we see and sense and all this other thing. From that information and from what we feel, etc., and experience, we create this thing that exists, space. The space we conceptualize is not the actual space. The actual space
what
doesn't give a shit, right?
right yeah, I mean
Your
that
concept
makes
of
sense.
space, right? So your concept of space intuitively needs a counter opposite, which is time.
I get what you're saying. So we only have so much information to understand, and everybody has their different view because not everybody knows the same thing, so their perceptions would be different
Well,
Of course,
hold
of
on.
course.
Yeah, 100%. Let me clarify something though, real quick. Time cannot be the opposite of space. Only space can be the opposite of space. It's like saying this computer, its opposite is calculator. It's like, no, it's not. Its opposite is not this computer.
Well,
Calculator is calculator, and the
by
opposite of
the
calculator is
Gary,
by the way,
non-calculator.
Marcus, space and matter is time. Time is a measurement of change of matter, and that measurement of change of matter, space is also a part, is
you're
a
talking
factor of.
theoretical physics. Yes, I'm aware of these
But I'm
theories, and
saying,
I reject them. Yeah,
Fair.
right.
Um,
What G was touching on there was right on the money. To be honest, I think neuroscience will prove this in the next few decades to come. That our parts of our brain intuitively, when we are in the process of understanding a synthesis which we can actively witness synthesizing, like a curious cat, we get this draw, this need to fucking understand. The issue is the whole universe is doing this continuously. So,
Marcus,
because our
time is what
brains
you
are
want to
trying to,
believe.
hold on, because our brains are trying to understand this actively, we do not create the conceptual space any different from actual space because our conceptual space, at least to most of you in here, we are constantly trying to align with what is actually space. And even if we're not, reality will slap you in the face in
Okay,
the
So
sense
so
that
you're
there's
saying
actually
time
no
is
escaping the real.
time,
hold on,
time is what you want to believe is
Nybeck.
what you're saying, and there's not an
Oh,
objective reality.
no, you're missing the
No,
point,
that's
Nybeck. So,
not what I'm saying.
Marcus, with that statement, what evidence do you have?
Of
What you just said.
what specifically? My entire claim?
Dude,
I mean, evidence of something that's going to probably happen within the next 10, 20 years? I cannot.
no. You just made the claim that people intuitively understand these things. That if there's a cat, that they see it and they want to know what's going on. And this is like the universe is doing the same thing, and we're
That's
just
not what I
all
said
part of
at
it.
all.
Like what
I said
evidence?
neuroscience will probably prove this within the next decade or two, is what I
well,
Okay,
said.
it's,
It's how I started off my statement,
so you
actually.
don't have any evidence. Okay.
well, I mean, to
Well,
jump in. Yeah, I mean, kind of he does in the sense that he doesn't have anything like offhand to give you, but I mean, as somebody who spends a pretty good amount of time in the neuroscientific research, basically what they have determined is that all of your behaviors, in accordance with what they've been able to determine, all of your behaviors are goal oriented and they're reward
Yes.
motivated, right? So one of the primary inclinations of the human being is information intake, right?
Yes.
It's kind of
Yeah.
what we were talking about earlier with the school stuff. It's like actually kids get like a dopamine kick and love information intake, but it's based on value in accordance with the reward, right? So it's got a pragmatic
Yes.
element to it. So yes, I mean
Yeah.
like and I can get you some research if you wanted to take a look at that. But
No,
in
no, no,
essence,
no. So, gee, I guess the research that I was talking about, like, I agree with what you said, but Marcus made the claim that the universe wants to do that. That the universe
it's
is.
not my claim.
well,
It's
you were
called,
created by the universe, eh?
well,
A little funny. No, I'm
He's
just
did you
talking
not say
perception.
that
He's
the,
talking
hold on,
perception.
Nybeck, stop. Just let me finish, guys. God
well, it's
damn.
called, it's not my claim.
hold on. You
You're
said
going to
you
make the
said
claim
that
anyway.
human
It's
beings.
not
Hold
what
on,
I
just let me
said.
finish.
Well, you're not
Dude, just let
speaking
me
the
finish,
truth, man.
man.
You're doing the same thing you've done 3 times prior, and I told you not to do it
Dude,
again.
dude,
I gave you a tip actually,
dude.
like you
If
gave
you
me one.
do not talk to me like that, Marcus,
What, the
ever
same way you
again.
talk to me?
Period.
Like giving
Dude,
you a
I'm not
tip the way you
talking to
gave
you
one to me?
very
Marcus,
specific.
Yeah.
Marcus, let's not be condescending. Even if it wasn't meant that way, let's not come off that way, okay?
Yeah,
Right.
Marcus,
I'm
dude.
sorry if I have during this call, by the way.
Yeah,
If I've come off as
Marcus.
condescending, I
Like
You're a
apologize.
dick.
Marcus, I'm literally just trying to clarify. I like you said something along the lines of when a human being sees a cat and they don't know what that cat's doing as they're curious. They want to know what's going on with that cat, right? And so you had this line of reasoning where
No.
people.
I was
Okay,
comparing the human mind to the curiosity of a cat, presenting the symbolism of the saying, curious like a cat. It's a saying.
okay,
That's what I was highlighting.
but then you related that to the universe, as in the universe was also curious.
No, not whatsoever.
Okay,
Are you listening to what I'm saying, or are you like? Because I
I am
can't help but
listening.
notice
I
you're the
am
only
listening to what
person
you're
that
saying.
continuously seems to
But we can
reconstruct
go
vaguely what
back
I
to the
say.
tape. This is all recorded, man. We can go back to the tape, and
Sure.
right after you said that, you said it's the same way the universe is.
No, I
Like,
said it's the same way you interact with the universe. Your conceptualization of space.
okay,
Marcus,
Yeah.
why do you think people being skeptical of you personally?
Well, Scott does not know me personally. I think rather Scott, perhaps does not understand what I'm trying to say, and that is obviously due to my fault. Or perhaps he seems to not actually want to listen to what I have to say, which is more
Marcus,
what
me
I'm
and you have
suspecting, considering he's
Marcus, me and you have
the only
talked on
one that
me and
doesn't
you
seem
have
to
talked
understand
on
what I'm trying to say. Whatever.
Marcus, me and you have talked on Discord several times, and the only thing I ever want is like I just ask you questions, right?
Not really.
I'm not
That's
trying to like
not what you
I'm
do,
not
man.
trying to like debunk you or anything. Like I'm trying to get to like
But
the
you've
crux
accused me
of your
multiple
point.
times of being a Nazi. Plus, like the people that I've
Nazi.
cited to you,
I didn't
yes,
accuse
and
you
people
of
that I've
being a
cited
Nazi.
to you, which talk about, for example, the metaphysics I'm referencing now, you have like blatantly made up citations that they never wrote down. I can't help but believe you have some type of personal issue with me, simply
Hold on.
because every time I try to speak, you
Hold on.
like intuitively or not intuitively,
Okay.
purposefully reconstruct what I say.
David,
Marcus,
calm
he was
down, brother. Be
Marcus.
calm.
Scott was dead on when he said you gish gallop for a while, and you talked for a good minute, and you complained about people cutting you off, and in the minute somebody say anything, you act like you
Cut
haven't
me off.
gotten anything to say, and he's just saying just get to the point and con- you know
Well,
be more
beauty of it
concise.
is,
And everybody
I feel like I've made a lot of
everybody
points.
agreed with Scott what Scott was saying.
Right. So what's Scott's point?
Well, basically, in a
He
nutshell,
made
he can't understand what you're saying, and he would like you to clarify.
I've
Yeah.
done so like
That's
5
the
different times.
That's the only nice way I can think of to put it.
Right.
and everybody can relate to what
I've
he
said it 5
everybody
different
can relate
times.
to his point.
Right. Well, it be so then. Perhaps I cannot be understood.
Well, see, my critique here is that there's nothing that you could describe as what time is without actually falling into the category of somehow effect or behavior. There's no, you have not done that yet.
I
That's
have
my
lack
own.
of effect, lack of behavior. It is quite
You
everything
have
which
to have
is
a behavior to have any sort of counterpoint. That is the
no,
opposite of
because
behavior.
negative. You have conceded that this is conceptual. To
Yeah.
experience any of the modalities, you need to experience space, right? For these modalities to manifest themselves in space,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So how am I supposed to make any claims for these
Define
modalities?
space.
Hold on,
Hold
Vivek.
on, Nick.
How am I supposed to make any claims for any of these modalities preemptively without appealing to a conceptual belief?
You don't have to. That's the whole point of metaphysics. Is what
Well,
happens
that is
whenever I break out everything down to what it is my brain is up to, irrespective of how I think or believe prior to conducting myself in this manner. What is it that the brain is latching onto for information? What kind of information? Right?
right. Well,
What is the
it's not in the
category?
future. Your brain's not in the future. Your brain does not actually know that the sun's going to come up tomorrow. Instead, you said I take the four
It really
modalities.
does, dude. Like it really does.
Wow.
Like no shit. Like I can postulate it. I'll bet you. Here, I'll make you a deal. for the next 100,000 days, the sun will come up.
Who's going to keep count?
And just let me know when you're done.
Well, I'm not certainly.
Let me know when you're done.
You're the systemist, dude. You do it.
Let me know when you're done.
Remember, G is a peak realist, so you gotta come at it from that angle.
Pinnacle
Yeah,
realist,
you have to do it.
computational realist, whatever you want to call it.
What he's trying to do is equate faith of believing whatever the fuck you want to probability outcome of taking information of what would more likely happen. He's trying to say those are the same equivalent.
Yeah, I got to second that.
That's not one of them.
Well, kind of in the sense that it's not belief for me to believe. It's for me to conclude that the sun is coming up tomorrow. I have an endless amount of data. I have an endless amount of coherence. I have an endless amount of
truth.
Pragmatics. I have it all, dude. Right.
You remember earlier I separated it from. Right. You remember earlier I separated it from fact. Correct.
You have reassurance.
I am the only one that is not a systemist in here, a systematic philosopher.
Oh, I think